Hi there, I'm Kala. Ever been told on your own birthday that no one's coming? Not even your parents? Yeah, mine actually wrote that to my best friend, said I should just deal with it. But that wasn't the worst part. They threw a barbecue the same day, called it a real family gathering, and posted the pictures like I didn't exist. They used my name to open credit cards. They faked my signature. Then they held a backyard cleansing ceremony to erase me. Why? Why would your own family go that far just to silence you? And what do you do when the people who raised you start using love as a weapon? Let me tell you what I did. The letter that didn't even have my name. The letter wasn't even addressed to me. It showed up in Narina's mailbox 2 days before my 33rd birthday, nestled between her utility bill and a coupon flyer for frozen pizza. The envelope was hand-addressed, the penmanship unmistakable, tight, sharp cursive with that little flourish my mother always used when she was trying too hard to appear composed. Narina stared at it like it might explode. "It's from your mom," she said quietly, not meeting my eyes. I raised an eyebrow. "Birthday card?" She hesitated, then handed it to me. "Kala, I don't think you should read this right now." That's when I knew. Birthday cards don't come with warnings. I took it anyway. My fingers were steady, but my stomach wasn't. The seal peeled away with that slow, papery sound, and inside was a single sheet of lined stationery. 7 words. "Don't expect anyone at her birthday. Deal with it." No signature, no explanation. Just that sentence, aimed like a dart at the center of my spine. I folded the letter and slid it into the drawer under our grocery lists, next to expired coupons and takeout menus. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink for a moment. But something behind my ribs curled tight and didn't let go. Narina sat across from me at the kitchen island. Her face was drawn, cautious, as if she were afraid I might break. "You okay?" "I'm tired," I said. She nodded, knowing better than to ask of what. It wasn't the first time my mother had made an occasion feel like a debt. When I was 9, I asked for a chocolate cake for my birthday. What I got was a lecture and a pair of wool socks. "Do you know how hard it is to put food on this table?" she said as I held the socks in my lap. "You should be grateful." Gratitude. That was the currency in our household. Every hug had a price tag. Every "I love you" came stapled to a receipt. "You think your birthday matters more than the woman who raised you?" That was her favorite line, followed closely by, "I gave up my whole life for you, don't forget that." As if existing had been a burden I forced her to carry. Thane, my father, never intervened. He just disappeared into the background like wallpaper, present, but silent. When he did speak, it was always something like, "Let your mother handle it," or worse, "Don't start trouble." So I learned not to start trouble. I learned to swallow disappointment like aspirin. Not pleasant, but necessary. By the time I was 16, I stopped expecting birthday parties. By 21, I stopped mentioning the date altogether. But even then, I held onto a tiny, frayed string of hope. Maybe one day, they'd show up without a grudge in tow. I was 33 now, and I finally realized that string had been severed years ago. Narina stayed quiet for a while, sipping from a chipped blue mug that read, #1 Plant Mom. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. It was full, like a room that had just been told a secret. "I know you don't want to hear it," she said eventually, "but that letter? It's cruel." I gave a half shrug. "It's familiar?" She reached across the counter, hand hovering like she wanted to touch mine, but wasn't sure if I'd accept it. "Kala, I hate how numb you've gotten to this." I finally met her eyes. "Numb isn't bad. Numb lets you plan a party and not wonder if your parents are going to ruin it." I turned to the notepad beside me. The guest list sat blank except for one scribbled word at the top. Confirmed. It was time to fill it out, with people who chose me. I started listing names, co-workers who sent me funny memes during lunch breaks, a neighbor who once helped me jump my car battery at 6 a.m. friends from my volunteer shift at the shelter. Narina, of course. No family, not this year. I could hear my mother's voice already, echoing from some imagined phone call. "Wow, all these strangers but not your own blood? That's sad." But what was really sad was how long I'd waited for that blood to act like they wanted me around. I pushed the letter further back in the drawer. "This time," I said aloud, mostly to myself, "I won't chase them. Narina didn't speak. She just nodded, like she'd been waiting years to hear me say that. I glanced out the kitchen window. The sun was higher now, stretching across the fence in long gold bands. Morning was giving way to noon. Time to start setting up the space, ordering extra chairs, or maybe fewer. I looked back down at my list. The names weren't long, but they were solid. And suddenly, that felt like enough. Everyone was somewhere else that day. The sky burned too blue that afternoon, the kind of brightness that felt performative, like the universe was throwing a party I wasn't invited to. After I finished taping the last balloon to the fence post, I stepped back, brushed my palms on my jeans, and took a breath. It wasn't much, just a few strings of lights, folding chairs in mismatched colors, and a modest cake chilling in the fridge. But it was mine and Narina's, and a few people who had RSVP'd not out of obligation but because they genuinely liked me. While I waited for the first guest to arrive, I made the mistake of opening my phone. It was like being sucker punched. There they were, Maris, Thane, Junia, and even my Aunt Verna, grinning like a glossy Christmas postcard. They stood in a sun-drenched backyard in Kansas, gathered around a grill, red Solo cups in hand, arms slung around each other like nothing in the world had ever gone wrong. Someone had tagged the photo. The caption burned hotter than the coals in their barbecue. "Real family doesn't forget where they came from." No mention of me. Not even a passive-aggressive "wish you were here." Just them, smiling, posting, pretending the day didn't mark something in my life they once claimed mattered. I stared at the photo until the screen blurred. Then I locked my phone and shoved it under a couch cushion like it was contaminated. They weren't just absent. They were somewhere else. Deliberately, publicly, happily, somewhere else. This wasn't new. The rejection had just never been this loud. Last Christmas, the whole family sat by the fireplace exchanging gifts. When it came time for mine, Maris handed me a squishy, misshapen sweater in a shade of oatmeal that looked like it had been pulled from the lost and found bin of a retirement home. She gave a smile too wide and said, "You've always liked practical things." Then, before I could even thank her, she turned to Junia and held out a velvet box with a wink. Inside was a perfume bottle, designer, gold-trimmed, imported. "Smells like success," Maris said. "You deserve it." Junia had barely peeled the wrapper off before the next gift appeared, a wallet, sleek and high-end, the kind you don't carry in your purse so much as you let it casually peek from the top to be admired. Why not me? I'd wanted to ask, but I knew better. The answer had already been rehearsed. "Calla, that kind of thing just doesn't suit you." Translation: You're not polished enough. You're not graceful like her. You're not worth the investment. It was always that way. If we both asked for the same thing, Junia got it. I got the speech. Even when we were kids, if she cried, someone rushed in with a Band-Aid and a cookie. When I cried, "You're being too sensitive." Over time, I stopped asking. I stopped hoping. And more dangerously, I started believing them. By the time guests began trickling into the backyard, I had put on my best face. I laughed. I refilled drinks. I complimented someone's earrings like I meant it. But when I ducked into the kitchen for a moment alone, I saw the cake I had bought for myself. Small, simple vanilla with pale yellow frosting. The kind a kid might pick out for their imaginary party. I sliced into it alone. Not because I was sad, but because no one else had bothered to remember this day mattered. And as I sat on the back step, fork in hand, I thought, if they could smile like that on the day they left me behind, if they could raise their glasses and post about real family without blinking, then maybe I didn't need to question anymore if I was the one who broke something. Because maybe, just maybe, I never belonged in the picture in the first place. I didn't cry that night. I didn't spiral or rage. Instead, I drafted a new invite list, one I would use from now on. I started with the people who showed up. Not perfectly, not with grand gestures, but consistently. The neighbor who brought extra folding chairs without being asked. Narina, who managed the playlist and made everyone feel like they belonged. My coworker Lila, who arrived with 2 bottles of wine and stories that made me laugh until my stomach hurt. I didn't leave any blank seats this time. I didn't write names in pencil. I didn't hope anyone would show up out of guilt. For the first time, I planned a future that didn't include apologies I was tired of begging for. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the yard. As laughter bubbled from the back porch and someone called my name to join the group photo, I realized I hadn't looked at my phone in hours. I had stopped waiting, and I felt more full than I had in years. When silence turns into a show, it was late morning, and the dishes from last night's gathering still sat stacked in the sink. I had planned to clean them after finishing a few emails, but instead I found myself scrolling. It was mindless, something between delay and denial. That's when a notification lit up my phone. Sable had messaged me on Instagram. "Have you seen this yet? Junia's out of pocket." I clicked the link without expecting much. Probably some cryptic quote about loyalty or broken families, which was Junia's favorite kind of digital sermon. But this wasn't cryptic. It was calculated. The video started with her in faux tears, those silent, shaking shoulders that said more than real crying ever could. She stared into the camera, her voice low but steady. Some people throw parties not because they're loved, but because they're scared of being alone. The screen cut to a slow pan of a birthday cake, clearly not mine, and Junia's smug expression returned just in time for her punchline. "It's giving. Desperation." Hashtags followed. #TruthHurts, #family. First #fake people music played in the background. Sultry, mocking. It was a Taylor Swift instrumental, ironic in the cruelest way. I didn't throw my phone or yell. I didn't even curse. I just sat back in my chair and let the humiliation settle over me like a second skin. It wasn't new, just louder. I hit save on the video, downloaded it, forwarded it to Orson with no caption. By now he knew what silence meant. By mid-afternoon I called my mother. I didn't want to, but sometimes dignity requires confrontation, not avoidance. She answered on the second ring. "Calla? I'm assuming you've seen what Junia posted." Pause. Then came the rehearsed sigh. "Oh, honey, she didn't mean you." I waited. Maris continued. "She's been going through a lot. You know how sensitive she is." She literally mimicked me. The setting, the wording, it was about me. Maris's breath hitched. I could already imagine the performance gearing up. "I am so tired of this," she said, voice cracking. "I try so hard to keep peace and all I get is blame. Maybe if you didn't always push us away, Junia wouldn't act out." "And maybe," I said, tone flat, "if you stopped justifying cruelty, you'd see where the rot is." Her sobs got louder. "I'm your mother, Calla. I carried you, fed you, gave up everything, and now I'm just an inconvenience to you?" I let the silence stretch. Her crying filled the space between us like fog, thick, obscuring. "You're not an inconvenience," I said, calm and sharp. "You're a manipulator. And I'm not falling for it." She hung up. I stared at my phone, not out of hurt but clarity, the kind that comes when you finally call a thing by its name. Orson swung by after work with Thai food in that steady way of his. We ate on the porch. He didn't bring it up. He never did until I did. "I saw the video," he said finally. "You okay?" I nodded, lips tight. "I'm done reacting." He tilted his head. "That's not like you." "I know." I set down my chopsticks. "But I'm done giving them fuel. This isn't about being right anymore. It's about protecting what's left of my sanity." I showed him the folder I'd started on my laptop, labeled "The Truth, No Edits." Inside were screenshots, videos, messages, every gaslight and guilt trip I'd saved, not for revenge, for record, for myself, in case I ever questioned what I lived through. He didn't say much, just nodded. It was enough. That night, I didn't post any cryptic responses or vague subtweets. I didn't defend myself in the group chat, where half of them watched in silence. I didn't tell Narina what happened. I just kept building that folder. Because sometimes, the most radical thing you can do isn't to shout. It's to document. And from that day on, I stopped giving them anything to misquote, not just emotionally robbed. By the end of that weekend, the noise had died down. No more subtweets, no more whispered comments passed through friends of friends. I hadn't looked at my phone in 2 days, and honestly, it felt like a detox I didn't know I needed. The silence from them wasn't peace, it was pause. But I was learning to make space for my own quiet. On Monday, Orson and I sat on the back porch, sipping watered-down lemonade. He was half listening to a podcast and half watching me scroll through my email. I didn't say much. I didn't need to. We'd gotten good at silent observation, but then he pointed to a flimsy flyer that had come in the mail. "Hey, why would we get this ad? It's for a luxury spa in Tacoma. You been hiding a secret weekend away?" I took the flyer and laughed out of reflex. I barely splurge on conditioner. You think I booked a facial package? But something about the print caught my eye. The last 4 digits of the card listed under the customer ID weren't familiar, yet the name was mine. I pulled out my laptop and opened my credit monitoring app. What started as curiosity turned into dread. 3 new credit cards had been opened in my name within the last 4 months. The balances? 1 nearing max. All of them unfamiliar vendors. Boutique jewelry, high-end hair tools, a luxury pet spa. I didn't say anything to Orson right away. I just got up, went inside, and sat at the kitchen island. The kitchen light flickered a little above me, one of those slow blinks that made you feel like you were in a thriller movie. I didn't panic. I opened a private browser window, typed, "How to report fraudulent identity use," and started reading. There was a dull pressure behind my eyes, but I didn't cry. Not then. Instead, I created a new folder in my email titled Theft, and I began. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. Not from fear, but from the kind of fury that wears silk gloves. I kept reviewing the vendor names. One of them, Crested Lane Jewelry, matched a brand my mother had once tagged in a photo online, a post of a bracelet with a caption that read, "For the woman who deserves everything." I opened her page, that same bracelet, worn in a selfie, time-stamped exactly 3 weeks after the card was opened. I felt a chill, not the kind that comes from cold, but from clarity. The next morning, I was brushing my teeth when a new email notification popped up. The subject line read, "Let's talk, just us girls." From Maris. I didn't open it immediately. I stared at it as the foam in my mouth went flat and bitter. Only after rinsing and sitting down at the kitchen table did I click. "Sweetheart," the message began, "I hate how tense things have gotten. We're family, and family should always come back together. I've been under some financial pressure lately. Nothing huge, just a couple things piling up. If you could help with the electric bill, I'd feel so seen and supported. It'd mean the world. I know you care. I raised you better than this tension." There it was, the bait wrapped in silk. I didn't reply. I forwarded the message into another folder. Proof, manipulation. Then I turned off notifications for her account entirely. That night, Orson noticed I wasn't reading, just sitting. "What's going through your head?" he asked. I didn't look up. "Do you remember what you said when we first got together?" He blinked. "Which part?" "That I needed to stop forgiving people just because I understood them." He smiled, then nodded. "Yeah, that still stands?" I closed the laptop and reached for my phone. "I'm calling a lawyer," I said. "Not for drama, just for clarity." By the end of the week, I had a virtual appointment with a consumer rights attorney based in Portland. She didn't gasp or clutch her pearls. She said, "It happens more often than you think, especially when parents think they still own a piece of their adult kids." The words hit like glass on tile. I wasn't devastated. I was done. Done with rationalizing theft as misunderstanding. Done with calling betrayal just how she is. This wasn't emotional neglect anymore. It was paper trails and forged consent. And if they came reaching again, it wouldn't be for a hug. It would be to grab what wasn't theirs. "Next time they reach for my name," I told Orson as we washed dishes that night, "it'll cut them." He nodded, handed me a towel, then sharpened the edge. And I did. The folders on my desktop weren't just files now. They were armor. They weren't done trying. But now, neither was I. The invitation came wrapped in familiarity. My mother's voice on the other end of the line, all silk and softness. "I'm making dinner this Saturday," she said. "Just us girls. No drama, I swear. I just want to see my daughter." She didn't say make things right. She didn't say I'm sorry. Just see my daughter. As if that alone could reset the last 3 decades. As if a pot roast could mend the kind of fractures lawyers were starting to look at. I didn't answer right away. Orson was making tea in the kitchen when I hung up. "Let me guess," he said, sliding me a mug. "She wants peace over pie." I gave a thin smile. "She wants something. She always does." He didn't try to dissuade me when I told him I'd go. He just said, "Then go, but keep both eyes open, and don't eat anything without a receipt." Saturday arrived like a storm that didn't want to commit. The clouds rolled in halfway, but left just enough sun to give the illusion of calm. I wore navy slacks and a white blouse. No jewelry, no softness. I didn't want anything for them to compliment. When I walked into my parents' house, I knew within seconds it wasn't just family. There were second cousins I hadn't seen in years, a great aunt from Topeka, even Junia's college roommate who once said I had a cold vibe. The dining table was dressed like a wedding venue, candles, matching name cards, floral centerpieces that reeked of performance. My mother greeted me with open arms I didn't step into. "You look thin," she said. "Sit. We have your favorite, roasted Brussels sprouts." I sat, ate quietly, endured the shallow chatter, waited. Halfway through the lemon meringue pie, she leaned in and whispered, "Come out back. Just you and me, sweetheart." The patio was empty. The air smelled of lilac and manipulation. She pulled out a manila envelope and held it like it weighed nothing. "This isn't a big deal," she began, voice honey-sweet. "It's just a little document. Something to help your father and me cover a loan. It's not even in your name. Just a co-signature." I didn't even look at it. "You brought me here," I said slowly. "Dressed a dinner table like a ceasefire, just so I'd be too polite to say no in front of your audience." Her smile faltered. "I didn't want to do this over the phone," she said. "No, you wanted the show." The silence between us was brittle. "You always make things harder than they need to be, Calla. And you always think guilt is a contract." I walked back inside, smiled at the table, sat down like nothing happened. The next morning, I posted a single paragraph on Facebook. "It's wild how often love looks like a fancy dinner followed by a signature request. If your affection comes with paperwork, I'm out, forever. No names, no accusations. But by lunch, I had over 70 views from family members. No likes, no comments. Just a trail of digital footprints leading into their own discomfort. Junia didn't message me, but she unfollowed me. Cousin Renee sent a sunflower emoji. Aunt Meg left the family group chat. That night, Orson made pasta. I sat on the couch, legs folded, rereading my post like it belonged to someone bolder than I felt. "They didn't fight back," I said. "They're regrouping," he replied. "You weren't supposed to tell your side." "Well," I said, taking a bite of spaghetti, "that's too damn bad." I opened a new folder on my laptop, labeled it Declaration 1. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't begging. I was documenting. I was stating. This was no longer a feud. It was a record. Let them pretend they didn't know. Let them talk in whispers behind screens. They tried manipulation, then guilt. And now? Now they were coming for my dignity. They tried guilt. Next, they chose shame. The next morning, I opened my laptop with the kind of stillness that only comes after a storm. Not because the wind had died, but because I'd braced for another hit. I checked my notifications out of habit, not expectation, and that's when I saw it. A private message from 80. An old high school friend who hadn't spoken to me in years, her name popping up now like a bad omen. "Hey," she wrote. "This might be none of my business, but I think you should see this." Below it was a link to a low-res video, uploaded to a barely used family account that I didn't even know still existed. I clicked. It started on a backyard deck I recognized. Aunt Margot's place in Topeka. A circle of plastic lawn chairs, a folding table draped with a floral sheet, and at the center, a large yellow bowl filled with water. My mother, my Aunt Junia, and a few of the cousins stood around it. Margot raised her voice dramatically, as if performing on a reality show. "Today we cleanse our family of betrayal, of disloyalty, of cold-hearted separation masked as independence." She dipped her fingers into the bowl, flicked water toward the group. Some of it landed on Unia's cheek. She laughed. Mom didn't look solemn. She looked smug. Someone in the background clapped. The video ended with Junia saying, "Amen to family who actually stays loyal." I didn't throw the laptop. I didn't scream. I just stared. the kind of frozen where your bones forget how to be part of your body. Then I downloaded the clip and added it to the folder labeled Evidence Rituals. I didn't feel baptized. I felt burned. That evening, I pulled out my budget sheets, opened the spreadsheet I hadn't touched in months. Rows and rows of transaction history blinked back at me. Venmo transfers to Junia for textbooks, Zelle payments to Maris for emergency bills, receipts for pharmacy runs, and a dozen lines just marked family support. The total for the past 12 months was $12,484.21. 12,000. Gone. I added one more line. Date. Today. Note. Finalized. Then I opened a blank email. To Maris, Junia, Margot, Thane. Subject. Update. Effective immediately, I will no longer be providing any financial support. Do not contact me for money. Attached. FinalLedger.pdf. No extra lines. No explanations. No apologies. I hit send. Then I took a deep breath and didn't exhale until I closed the browser. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, and for the first time in years, they didn't tremble with second-guessing. Dinner that night was quiet. Orson made grilled cheese and tomato soup, the kind of meal we defaulted to when life felt heavy and dumb. He set a bowl in front of me. You didn't owe them any of it. I nodded, dipping the sandwich, watching the cheese stretch and tear. I know. You never had to pay for love that wasn't real. That one hit harder. I swallowed too fast and coughed, waving off his concern. Do you think they'll come after me for real now? I asked, half joking, half expecting him to say yes. He shrugged. They already were. Now they just know you're not going to stand there while they pick your pockets and call it affection. I nodded slowly. They baptized themselves in plastic bowls. Yeah, he chuckled. You baptized your damn self in receipts and boundaries. That made me smile. It was bitter, but it was real. I went back to my desk and renamed the folder. The Truth, No More Mercy. Inside it, the ritual video sat beside the financial spreadsheet, an archive of sins dressed in Sunday clothes. For years, they'd taught me to confuse silence with grace. But grace doesn't mean surrender. Grace doesn't mean keep giving until you're empty. Grace sometimes is saying, no more. So I stopped, and for the first time I didn't feel empty. I felt like someone finally closing a leak that had been draining me for decades. Later that night, I stared at the ceiling and waited. Waited for the regret, for the panic, for the inevitable voice inside me that always whispered, you'll miss them. It didn't come. Instead, I heard Orson breathing steady beside me. I heard the quiet hum of the fridge. I felt the stillness of a home that wasn't built on guilt. I wasn't proud, not yet, but I wasn't ashamed either. And that was new. The cost of their silence just went up. I had just finished folding laundry, something grounding, repetitive, safe, when the call came in. The name on the screen wasn't familiar, but the area code was Portland, and something in my stomach tightened like it already knew this would be different. Miss Calla Keene? The voice asked. This is Claire Rasmussen from Perkins & Rowe, legal counsel. The last time I heard a sentence begin like that, it was a scam call trying to collect on an overdue parking ticket that never existed. But Claire sounded real, measured, heavy, but not hesitant. I'm calling in regard to an inquiry we received through our identity fraud division, she said. Your name appears on a financial application filed at Kestrel Credit Union. It was processed last fall. I hadn't applied for anything last fall, Claire continued. We reviewed the physical documents. Your social security number was included. So was your signature. My throat went dry. I hadn't signed anything for anyone in over a year. Did you say signature? I asked. It bears strong resemblance to your handwriting, she confirmed. But upon analysis, we believe there's clear indication of forgery. My fingers were already moving, grabbing a pen, scribbling on the back of a receipt. Filed by who? We can't legally disclose that unless you choose to press charges, but we have enough to file a criminal complaint, if you wish to move forward. I stared at the wall, the beige paint blurring into noise. I already knew who did it. It wasn't a question. It wasn't a stranger who guessed my social security number and practiced my loops and slants. It was family. More precisely, it was someone I had once believed would never go that far. I didn't speak for a moment. Then I said, "Please send everything you can to my email. I'll consider next steps." Claire's voice softened. "I know this is hard." I almost laughed. "You have no idea." When I hung up, I didn't cry, didn't scream. I didn't call Orson or Narina. I just sat in the quiet and repeated one sentence in my head like a metronome. They didn't just lie to me, they used me. By the end of that same day, my inbox was a battlefield. First, a message from a college friend, Jasmine, who now worked in branding. She forwarded a screenshot from Junia's most recent collab, a sponsorship for a wellness skincare line. "They dropped her," Jasmine wrote. "Apparently the brand team did a background scrub, found her shady TikTok, and your public response. Said it didn't align with their values." Right below it was a second message from a former coworker of Verna's. "Just thought you should know," it read. "HR opened a probe into Verna today. Word is, someone flagged her for misusing company email to circulate that weird video about spiritual cleansing. Not cool when you're a manager." I blinked. Twice. No text from Junia, no calls from Verna, no apology from Maris, of course not. They weren't sorry they used me. They were sorry they got caught. I leaned back in my chair and opened the Truth, No More Mercy folder. I added 2 new subfolders, Legal Prep and Collateral Damage. I wasn't out for blood, but I wasn't about to bandage their wounds either, not when they'd walked barefoot into glass they laid themselves. That night, as the rain started tapping lightly against the kitchen window, Orson pulled out 2 mugs and filled them with tea. "How bad?" he asked, sliding mine across the table. "Forgery," I said simply. His jaw clenched. "They actually—" "Yep." He didn't ask if I was pressing charges. He just waited, and I answered slowly, "Not yet." His brow lifted. "I want them to sit in it first," I said. "The shame, the silence, the knowledge that I know, and that I'm not running." He nodded once. "You want them to unravel." "No," I corrected, sipping my tea. "I want them to see themselves clearly. No excuses, no fake apologies, just reflection." A pause. "You always think clearer when you're angry," he said, almost admiringly. I smiled. Not warm, not cruel, just tired. "It's not anger, not anymore. It's math. It's record-keeping." My laptop sat open beside me. I clicked through my folders, then paused on a blank Word doc and typed out the heading, Victim Impact Statement Draft, not because I'd made a decision, but because someday soon, I might. The next morning, as I scrolled aimlessly through local news with a cup of stale coffee, I found an op-ed about accountability in family businesses. It wasn't about me, but it might as well have been, because one sentence stood out like it had been written just for me. Silence isn't protection, it's complicity. That's when I knew they were no longer just toxic. Now, they were dangerous. I didn't plan the moment it happened. There was no dramatic music swelling in the background, no inner monologue about courage. It was just a quiet Tuesday morning, sunlight slanting across my kitchen tiles, when I clicked Create Post. Not a draft, not a journal entry, a public post. I titled it, What Family First Really Looked Like. Below the title, I started attaching, not opinions, not memories blurred by bias, just evidence. A scan of the bank statement with my name tied to a credit card I never applied for. The forged signature, side by side with a document I had signed years ago. Screenshots of the TikTok Junia had posted mocking lonely narcissists who throw themselves pity parties. The email from Maris, asking for money to cover this one last bill, right after the emotional landmines. A blurry photo from the BBQ, where they toasted marshmallows under string lights without a single mention of my name. The video of Aunt Margot flinging water from a salad bowl in some half-serious, fully petty cleansing ceremony. I added a caption. I'm not looking for revenge, just resolution. This is what family has looked like for me. This is my side. I deserve to say it. I read it twice, made one small edit to punctuation, then hit post. That was it. I got up, made myself coffee, watered the plant Narina gave me 2 birthdays ago. I didn't check my phone for an hour. By the time I did, it was chaos. The post had been shared nearly 700 times. There were comments from people I didn't know, messages from friends I hadn't spoken to in years. I had no idea you went through this. My sister did the same to me, Thank you for speaking up. This post is going to save someone. Maybe me. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just stared at the screen, my hand shaking slightly, not from fear, but release. A few quiet pings came through later that night. A private message from my cousin Lenny. I always wondered, none of it ever made sense. Another from a friend of Verna's. She used to talk like you owed them something. Now I know what she meant. Someone I didn't recognize at all. I screenshotted everything before they take it down. You're not alone. Then came the counter-strike. Maris didn't tag me, of course. She never does when she wants to maintain her image. But the post was unmistakably about me. A photo of her with Junia on a park bench, all soft edges and fall filters. The caption, "No parent is perfect, but love is loving your kids even when they abandon you, even when they twist the story. Grace is for everyone." It garnered hearts, hugs, and the usual comments from her circle, mostly people who hadn't seen my post yet. But not everyone played along. Aunt Elise wrote, "Grace doesn't cover fraud." A guy named Caleb, who I vaguely remembered from childhood summer barbecues, said, "It's funny how nobody refuted what was posted. They just cried louder." Within hours, Maris disabled comments. Then she made the post visible to friends only. She never messaged me. Junia never apologized. Verna apparently took a digital detox. And still, I didn't reply. I didn't post again. Not because I had nothing left to say, but because I'd already said what mattered. The truth didn't need my defense. It stood on its own. That evening, Orson poured me a glass of wine and asked, "How do you feel now?" I considered it. "Lighter," I said, "and heavier at the same time." He nodded like he understood. Healing's like that. It doesn't always come wrapped in peace. Sometimes it arrives wearing armor. "I didn't do it to ruin them," I said quietly. "I did it to stop hiding." He raised his glass. "To that." The toast wasn't loud, just a soft clink in a quiet room. I spent that night answering a few messages, flagging a couple of hateful ones, and turning off my notifications. Then I curled up on the couch with a blanket I bought myself after Christmas last year. The first holiday I spent alone on purpose. That blanket had become something sacred. Not because it was warm, but because no one had to approve of it. I didn't have to earn it. Neither did my truth. And for once, I felt like that was enough. I closed my eyes, not with fear or guilt or second-guessing, but with a breath that felt whole. And with every truth exposed, I started becoming someone new. I woke up to gray light leaking in through the blinds, and a sense of stillness so deep it felt like something had shifted in the night, quietly, but permanently. The kind of shift you can't undo, even if you wanted to. I didn't feel the twitch to scroll through other people's lives or scan for damage control. Instead, I walked to the kitchen barefoot, brewed a pot of coffee, and stood at the window watching the neighbor's dog chase a squirrel like the world hadn't cracked open the day before. But it had, and not in a violent, explosive way. It cracked like old ice finally giving way beneath pressure that had built for decades. I sipped my coffee and opened my laptop. Not because I had something to prove, but because I didn't have anything to hide. There it was, my post, still pinned, still visible, still mine. The truth was still out in the open, and I wasn't scrambling to explain it. I wasn't checking who had liked it, or who had stayed silent. I wasn't waiting for a phone call that wouldn't come. I had said what needed saying, and they had heard it. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of implications, of reputations reevaluated, of quiet conversations happening behind closed doors. Doors I no longer tried to knock on. Maris hadn't reached out. Not with a message, not with a voicemail, not even with another cryptic post. Maybe she was licking her wounds. Or maybe, for once, she was actually listening. That morning, I received an email from the identity fraud lawyer, Claire. "Calla," it read, "I wanted to update you that the documentation is complete. The evidence of forgery is conclusive. No further signatures or cooperation are required from you at this point, unless you choose to proceed with a formal complaint." I read it twice, then minimized the window. I wasn't ready to press the button yet, but I wasn't scared to anymore. I thought about everything I'd uploaded. The receipts, the bank statements, the email Maris sent me asking for money while calling it healing, the staged cleansing video, the TikTok, The backyard BBQ they hosted on my birthday, tagging it #FamilyFirst. I hadn't embellished. I hadn't fabricated. I had simply told the truth and let it speak for itself. And it did. The comments were still rolling in. Some supportive, some stunned, a few accusatory. But most were from people who recognized the shape of my pain in their own lives. People who said, "I thought I was the only one," or "You just described my mother," or simply, "Thank you." I hadn't meant to start a movement, but sometimes truth becomes contagious. Later that afternoon, I went to the community garden. The sun was peeking through in patches, and I needed to feel something grow that wasn't resentment. As I dug my hands into the soil, planting early tomato starters, I found myself humming a tune I didn't recognize. Maybe something Orson played in the car once, or maybe something my spirit had been holding in silence. Across from me, a woman named Lila from my volunteer group waved. She didn't ask how I was. She just passed me a trowel and said, "The earth's finally soft enough. It's a good day to put things down." I smiled. Yeah, it really is. That evening back home, I made dinner without rushing. I didn't burn the garlic. I didn't overcook the pasta. I poured myself a glass of wine. Not because I needed to forget, but because I wanted to celebrate remembering who I was before all the bargaining and begging. At the table, Orson raised an eyebrow as I served the food. "You look taller." "Maybe I let go of something heavy," I said, smiling. We ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes before he asked, "Do you think they'll ever apologize?" I shook my head. "I think they'll justify, they'll spin, they'll perform. But apologize? That would require admitting they weren't the victims. Would it help if they did?" I considered the question, then answered, "Only if it was real. But even then, it's not the apology I needed, it's the boundary." After dinner, I went back to my laptop and reopened my folder. I didn't add anything new. I didn't need to. But I did create one last document, a personal one. A kind of ending I hadn't allowed myself before. It was titled, "Final Letter Not to Be Sent." I wrote it like a release, not forgiveness, just release. "Dear Maris," I began. I kept it short. 3 paragraphs. No anger, no pleading. Just a quiet acknowledgement that I was stepping out of the loop, the one where I tried, they took, and I twisted myself into pieces just to keep a place at a table that only served guilt. I saved the file and closed the laptop. Healing isn't always soft. Sometimes it's sharp, like cutting a rope that's been around your neck. But when the rope falls, you breathe like it's the first time. I looked out the window. The sky had turned lavender. A breeze moved through the trees like a sigh of relief, and I realized something I hadn't let myself believe until now. They didn't get to be the end of my story. I did. Looking back, I wish I could tell my younger self one thing. You don't have to keep bleeding just because someone else keeps handing you the knife. We're raised to believe family means forever. That forgiveness is automatic. That blood outweighs harm. But healing, real healing, isn't about pretending something didn't break. It's about finally saying, "This hurt me, and I won't carry it quietly anymore." And the moment I stopped hiding behind shame, the moment I let truth speak louder than obligation, something shifted. Not in them, in me. So if you're out there wondering if your pain is valid, if your story is bad enough to walk away, let me say this clearly. You don't need permission to protect your peace. You don't need a scar to prove you were cut. I'm not here to tell you what justice should look like in your life, but I am saying silence isn't healing. And love without respect? That's just control in a nicer outfit. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you were told you could never leave? What did it teach you about love, truth, or even yourself? Drop a comment below. Type 1 if this story hit close to home, or let me know where you're watching from. And if this wasn't your cup of tea, I'd still love to hear why. Every voice adds something. And hey, if this video made you feel seen, supported, or just a little braver, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next story. There's more truth to tell, and you deserve to hear it. Thanks for being here, really.
Hi, my name's Maribel. They said it was just a seating error, a policy misunderstanding, a mistake. But when your own sister pulls you out of first class in front of a crowd, and your mother calls, not to ask if you're okay, but to say you've embarrassed the good daughter. You start wondering, how many years did they spend rehearsing that silence? And if I never spoke up, how many more would they rewrite me out of the picture? What do you do when your family doesn't just forget you? They erase you on purpose? Would you have stayed quiet? It had been 5 years since I last saw her. 5 years without a call, a text, a holiday card. But the moment I stepped up to the first-class counter, holding my printed boarding pass like it was proof I deserved to exist, she recognized me. Darlene. Perfect hair, regulation uniform, name tag polished. She didn't blink, didn't smile, didn't even pretend she didn't know me. Economy lines over there. You're in the wrong place. No pause, no warmth, no hesitation, just cold delivery. I stood there, holding my passport and ticket, dressed in a beige sweater and jeans. I knew how I looked. Comfortable, understated, maybe forgettable. Not high profile, not polished like her, but definitely not out of place in the first-class line. Still, the man behind me let out a half sigh. The woman with a designer bag gave me the once-over, and that familiar heat, embarrassment, started crawling up my spine. I think there's a mistake, I said, soft enough that it almost sounded like an apology. Darlene didn't even bother to look at the ticket again. No, there isn't. Her voice was neutral, but her eyes said it all. Not you. Not here. I stepped aside, my throat tight, fingers curling around the edge of my ticket like it might suddenly erase what just happened. But this wasn't new. This was muscle memory. When I was 13, she convinced our music teacher I had stage fright. Got my solo reassigned. She told our neighbors I wasn't really into school because some kids just don't have that spark. She never raised her voice, never made a scene. She just removed me, quietly, efficiently. And every time, she made it look like I had misunderstood something. Now here I was, standing in the exact place I paid to be in, and somehow, still being told I didn't belong. She didn't ask why I was flying, didn't ask how I'd been, didn't ask if I needed anything. She just saw me and moved me out of her frame again. I walked away from the line. I didn't know where I was going, not really, just away. That's when a man, maybe mid-50s, plaid shirt, travel pillow slung around his neck, tapped my shoulder. You okay, miss? I nodded, not trusting my voice to do anything useful. I headed toward a quiet corner of the terminal, near one of those massage chairs no one ever uses. Sat down, still holding my boarding pass like a receipt for a refund I couldn't claim. Invisibility's a strange thing. You don't even realize it's been happening until someone looks right through you. And Darlene? She'd been doing it since the day I was born. But today felt different. Today, I had something she didn't know I had. Leverage. Maybe it wasn't just about her pretending I didn't belong. Maybe she'd built a whole system on people like me staying silent. And if that was true, then she had no idea what was coming. I didn't move far. A couple gates over, near the glass wall facing the runway, there was a bench open beside an out-of-order vending machine. I sat there just long enough to catch my breath, then made my way back toward the check-in area. If I left now, she'd win. And I wasn't in the mood to hand her another quiet victory. As I stepped back into the first-class zone, Darlene had shifted position, still at her podium, talking to a younger male agent. She was all smiles now, charming, efficient. But when she saw me approach, her face didn't just change. It dropped, like the act was too heavy to hold for more than a few minutes. I handed her my boarding pass. She didn't take it right away. She looked at it like I'd handed her a napkin with gum inside. Maribel? She said, tilting her head. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She narrowed her eyes, flipped the pass between her fingers, checking it like I'd stolen it. This yours? She asked, one brow raised. I nodded. She leaned in slightly, not to whisper, but to lower the pitch of her voice just enough so that it sounded like she was doing me a favor by not saying what she really wanted to say. Then came the line that hit harder than the first. Doesn't match the look. People around us shifted. One woman clutched her tote bag tighter. A teenage boy behind me half smiled, waiting for a scene. I didn't give them one. My lips pressed together. I didn't argue, didn't protest. But inside, I was taking inventory of every time she'd called me invisible with her eyes, of every room she had claimed by simply refusing to let me in. I glanced down at the counter, at the reflective surface, and saw myself. Not glamorous, not intimidating, just present. And that alone seemed to offend her. "My name is on the ticket," I said, voice level. "That should be enough." She didn't respond. She looked at the agent beside her, then at the queue behind me, and finally back at me. "We'll have to verify this. Please wait aside." There was no apology in her tone, no grace in her delivery, just procedure being weaponized. I stepped away, again. But this time, something shifted in me. I didn't feel smaller, I felt sharper. There's something about being consistently underestimated that teaches you patience, and something about being sidelined your whole life that gives you an extraordinary talent for watching people reveal themselves. I stood a few feet from the counter, not pacing, not fidgeting, just still, watching. That's when it hit me. She wasn't surprised to see me here. She was surprised I made it this far on my own, and maybe that scared her more than anything. See, when people disappear from your life long enough, you start inventing justifications for their absence. Not because you believe them, because the truth hurts too much to carry around every day. I used to think Darlene pulled away from me because we were just different people, different goals, different lives. But I see it now. I wasn't missing from her world. I was erased, on purpose. Standing next to me didn't fit the version of herself she wanted people to see. So she cut me out, quietly, strategically, just like she did with anyone who didn't polish her reflection. A few more people boarded. The line moved on. I could hear her voice again, cheerful now, smooth, fake as dollar store perfume. Then, suddenly, louder than necessary, "We'll have to verify this, please wait aside." Like she needed everyone to hear it one more time. I nodded. "Of course," I said. My voice came out flat, but clear. She questioned my identity in front of strangers. Loudly, with purpose. But I wasn't angry anymore, just aware. The question wasn't whether I belonged. The question was, how long would I let her keep pretending I didn't? I didn't move much after she told me to step aside, just stood off to the side of the gate, where the glare from the terminal windows couldn't quite reach. My boarding group was already on its way in. Suits, watches, voices that never lowered when talking about business. And there I was, standing alone with a ticket I'd paid for and a name that apparently didn't match the look. The gate agent began scanning passengers in groups. The same scanner that had just confirmed my seat, my flight, my identity. Green light. But it didn't matter anymore. Because it wasn't about the scanner, it was about her. I waited. Tried to calm the beat of my heart the same way I used to calm myself during fire drills in school, by staring at something fixed and breathing through my teeth. Then they called the final boarding group. I stepped forward again. No fanfare, no confidence, just quiet resolve. I held my boarding pass out, let it scan. That familiar tone chimed. The light blinked green. I started to walk. But before my second step, I felt a hand, light but firm, wrap around my arm. "Excuse me, ma'am," Darlene said, the edges of her smile sharp as paper. "I believe there's been a mistake." I pulled my arm gently away. It scanned green. "I'm aware," she said, keeping her tone just low enough to sound professional. "But you're not on the first-class manifest. I need you to step aside." People turned. Not all of them, just enough. The couple from earlier. The man with the Rolex. A kid with earbuds in but one eye on us. I stared at her. "My name is Maribel Trevors. That's my seat." Darlene's mouth moved, but it wasn't speech. It was calculation. Then she spoke louder this time, deliberately over-articulating. "You're not on the manifest for first class. Please step aside." Now everyone was watching. My fingers tightened around the strap of my tote. I could have reached into it, pulled out the email confirmation, opened the app, called over a supervisor. But the deeper truth was harder to explain, and more humiliating. She knew I belonged on that list. She'd seen the manifest before I ever arrived. She just didn't want me in that cabin. Not because of protocol, but because of proximity. She needed to make sure everyone there knew that she, Darlene, the respected senior flight lead, was nothing like the woman in the beige sweater with scuffed flats. Behind me, someone whispered, "This is ridiculous." A few chuckles. A sigh. I looked down at my ticket again. It hadn't changed. Neither had my seat assignment, only her willingness to let me claim it. I looked up, found her eyes. She didn't flinch. I gave the pass to the other attendant, who was standing slightly behind her, uncertain. She looked younger, early 20s maybe, new. The kind who still asked questions silently with her eyes. I didn't say anything, I just nodded once. Then I turned, walked down the bridge, not toward first class, but to the back. The long walk, past rows of narrow seats, legs spilling into aisles, overhead bins already full, and no room for anyone like me to be angry. My seat was in the rear half of economy. A middle seat, ironically. I placed my bag overhead, sat down, and buckled in with fingers that felt disconnected from my body. People around me barely noticed. Someone coughed. A woman flipped through a travel magazine. The hum of the plane filled the space like a curtain, shielding me from the world I wasn't allowed to be part of. That was the moment it sunk in. Not the seat change, not the whispers, but how fast and easy it had been for her to do it. No hesitation, no apology, just another deletion, masked as procedure. She didn't just move me, I thought. She erased me, and no one said a damn thing. Out of the corner of my eye, the younger attendant passed by. She glanced at me, briefly, but said nothing. Just kept walking, lips tight. Then I heard it. 2 rows up, 2 voices. Low, but not quiet enough. Did she just pull her own sister out of first class? My breath caught. They knew, they all knew. And they let it happen anyway. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I knew exactly which voice said it, and I knew what they meant. Some people whisper because they're afraid. Others whisper because they enjoy watching someone else fall. That kind of whisper, it leaves a mark. I leaned into the window, pressing my fingers lightly against the cool frame. Outside, clouds moved slow and silent, like they didn't know what just happened. Or maybe they did, and they were just tired of reacting. The woman in the aisle seat beside me was flipping through a crossword book. Not once did she look up. Maybe she was being polite, maybe indifferent. I didn't care either way. I wasn't in the mood for small talk. I just needed stillness. They always say the worst pain is silence, I thought, watching the wing slice through sky. But it's the silence that comes after someone makes you disappear that cuts deeper. 30,000 feet in the air, and I felt more grounded than I had in years. Because now, I knew what I was up against. Darlene hadn't just hurt me. She'd made me disposable, and she didn't have to raise her voice or call me names to do it. She just used the tools she'd always used. Control, performance, and the sharp edge of professionalism that made everyone else think she was doing her job. No message, no apology, nothing from her. Of course not. She'd spent her entire adult life pretending I wasn't there. Why would she start seeing me now? I pulled out the travel wallet in my bag and flipped through the flap, where I usually kept receipts and half-used coffee punch cards. Tucked inside was an old Polaroid, faded now, edges curled, colors warped by time, but I still knew what it was. Me, in a pale blue secondhand dress, standing outside my high school gym on graduation day. My parents flanking me awkwardly, arms stiff, smiles forced. And on the end, Darlene. Her smile broader, her stance perfect, like she belonged in a brochure for sibling harmony. I used to keep that photo on my dresser. For years, it was the only evidence I had that we'd been in the same place at the same time. Just once. Then one day it was gone. I found out weeks later. Darlene had gone through the family albums and reorganized them. My photo never made it back. When I asked her where it went, she didn't blink. "It didn't fit the theme," she said, like I was the mismatched napkin at a catered event. I stared at that photo now, back pressed into the thin airplane seat, knees grazing the tray table. I thought about how many times I'd asked for space in her world, only to be told I was asking for too much. But I wasn't. I wasn't asking to be the center. I was asking to be counted. There's something about family that makes the cuts feel deeper. Strangers can hurt you, but family makes it personal, and then tells you it wasn't. They call it teasing. They call it just how she is. They call it keeping peace. She edited me out long before I ever took up space. I whispered to no one, as the seatbelt light dinged overhead. I glanced at the dark screen of the seatback in front of me, catching my reflection. Tired eyes, lips set, chin higher than I expected. "I used to think she resented me," I said under my breath. "Now I think I just didn't match the story she was telling." And instead of rage, I felt a strange, quiet clarity settle in. I didn't need the photo anymore. I didn't need her to hand me anything, not recognition, not regret. I knew I was there, and I remembered. That was enough. A few rows ahead, a crew member made her way down the aisle. She paused near my row. Not long, just long enough to hover. Her gaze lingered. Then she moved on. But as she passed, I heard her murmur low, just loud enough for the back of my neck to catch the weight of her words. "I'd never treat my sister like that." She didn't say it to me. Maybe she didn't even mean for me to hear. But I did. And just like that, I realized someone had been watching. Maybe more than one. After the murmured words from the passing crew member, I stayed still for a moment longer. Then I quietly unbuckled my seatbelt, gathered my things, and made my way to the rear lavatory. I didn't rush. I didn't care if the occupied light turned red behind me. I needed space, any space that didn't remind me of how small I'd been made to feel. Inside, I locked the door, placed my tote bag on the closed toilet lid, and pulled out a notebook. It wasn't fancy, just a soft, leather-bound journal I'd been carrying for years, mostly untouched, pages still stiff with the kind of hesitation that only silence builds. I flipped to a clean page, gripped the pen tighter than I meant to, and started writing. "You've never said my name in public, Darlene. Not once." I stopped, let the sentence sit, the ink still wet, and then, in my head, a flood of memories began rolling in without warning, so fast and sharp I couldn't stop them if I tried. I remembered our cousin's wedding, how Darlene introduced everyone at our table by name, pausing for anecdotes, funny comments. When she got to me, she said, "This is my sister," with the same tone someone uses to introduce their tax accountant. No story, no laugh, not even a proper name. I remembered church picnics, where people would ask, "Is that your sister?" And she'd shrug. "She's the youngest." At a family reunion one summer, a neighbor asked how many siblings she had. She smiled and said, "Just me and my brother. The middle child is more of a mystery." I should have said something, but I didn't. I was taught not to make things uncomfortable. But here's the truth. Silence isn't neutral, it's participation. I leaned against the sink, journal still open, pen hovering. She knew my name. She just didn't want to give it air. Because names carry weight. They demand recognition. They make people real. To her, I wasn't useful as a sister, only as a prop. A blank space she could fill however she needed depending on the room. I used to think maybe she was just forgetful, busy. Maybe she didn't like the sound of my name. Maybe she was protecting me from something, embarrassment, awkward questions, whatever. But that was me being generous. That was me doing the emotional math to explain someone else's subtraction. No, it wasn't forgetfulness. It was strategy. She didn't want me to be someone. She wanted me to stay convenient. And the more invisible I stayed, the more spotlight she got. The more her version of the story solidified. I put the pen down and stared at what I'd written. The thing about being erased is that eventually you stop trying to be seen. You start building your world in the shadows, and sometimes the shadows teach you how to shine alone. It wasn't poetic, it wasn't dramatic, but it was real. I closed the journal slowly, pressing the cover down like sealing something sacred. Someone knocked gently on the door. "Ma'am?" a soft voice said from outside. "Someone just asked about you." I didn't move. She said, "She's your sister." Of course she did. Now that there's an audience again. I left the lavatory, ignoring the curious glances as I returned to my seat. Darlene didn't follow. She wouldn't. Not without a witness. And certainly not without the right lighting. The cabin had shifted into that quiet lull that comes after a meal on a long flight. Shades down. Passengers either half dozing, watching silent movies, or flipping through those tired, laminated catalogs of overpriced junk. I leaned back, tilted my head toward the aisle, and closed my eyes, partly to rest, mostly to listen. From just behind the galley curtain, 2 flight attendants whispered in the kind of hushed voices that people use when they think no one's paying attention. They didn't know I was awake. Or maybe they did. People like me have a tendency to blend in, until we don't. "She flagged that guy with the stained jeans last week," one said, barely above a breath. "Said his face was off-brand." The other chuckled. "Classic Darlene. The Darlene system. Rank 'em by look, then reshuffle as needed." I kept my face still, body calm, like someone in light sleep. But inside, my mind locked on every word. Off-brand? System? This wasn't just about me. It was about control, visibility, who got seen and who got shuffled. Darlene didn't just push me out because she could. She'd built a pattern, one that relied on silence and complicity, one that looked a lot like policy, but wasn't. I stayed still, absorbing each syllable like it was testimony. They didn't say my name, but I heard hers. I heard the laughter, the certainty. She didn't climb the ranks because she was excellent at her job. She climbed because she knew how to curate a narrative, one that made passengers feel they were paying for an image, and she'd make sure that image stayed clean, polished, white, thin, unthreatening. I opened my eyes slightly, scanned the cabin. The older black woman who'd boarded with me? Gone. The Latino man with the sleeve tattoos who'd been ahead of me in line? Reassigned. And me, seated in the back row, middle seat near the galley. This wasn't about performance. It was about optics. I took a breath through my nose, slowly. Let the truth settle. Then I reached into my bag, pulled out the same journal from earlier. Not for a quote, not for a poem. This time, I opened to a fresh page and started a list. Flight 287. Passenger, moved after check-in, staff names. Not yet confirmed, conversation overheard. Rank 'em by looks. My handwriting was fast but steady. It felt less like journaling and more like building something. A case, maybe, or a weapon. This wasn't about Darlene and me anymore. This was about a system she'd been allowed to build, unchecked, because people like me assumed we were alone. And maybe that's how systems like this survive, by isolating their targets just enough to make each one think they're the outlier. But I wasn't alone, not anymore. I stared at the ink drying on the page. The weight of it all didn't crush me, it sharpened me. If a system benefits from silence, I wrote beneath the list, then noise becomes a form of justice. The lights flickered slightly as the crew prepared for descent. I clicked the pen closed, tucked the journal into the seat back pocket, and reached for my water cup. Just then, a younger flight attendant passed. She didn't make eye contact, didn't break stride, but she slipped something into my hand as she moved past. A folded napkin. I opened it discreetly beneath the tray table. One sentence, scrawled in pen. "You're not alone. I've seen it too." I read it twice. Then I folded it back up and placed it next to my journal. The plane had begun its slow descent, window shades still drawn, cabin dim. The kind of stillness that only comes when people are too tired to pretend they're not exhausted. I sat upright now, tray table up, hands folded on my lap like I was waiting for a verdict. I kept glancing at the folded napkin beside me. I didn't need to read it again. I'd memorized the slant of the handwriting, the way the words curved like they'd been written in a hurry, but with care. You're not alone. I've seen it too. There was comfort in that sentence, but also weight. Because if someone else had seen it, that meant more had, which meant no one said a word. A rustle passed near my shoulder. The younger flight attendant from earlier returned, this time with the breakfast cart. Her eyes met mine just briefly, then shifted away. As she moved down the aisle, she paused, turned back, and silently mouthed something. I couldn't catch it, not all of it, but I saw the shape of one phrase. Not the first. My stomach flipped. When she circled back, she slipped something else into the side pocket of my seat. Not a napkin this time, a folded safety card. I waited until she passed to reach for it. Inside, scrawled in a different hand, cleaner, more practiced. You're not the first. We've seen her do it. We just didn't know she'd do it to family. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt shifted. This was bigger than humiliation, bigger than her voice calling me out in front of a terminal full of strangers. This was a pattern, and I wasn't just a casualty. I was a witness now. I stared ahead, into nothing. My thoughts leapt to someone I hadn't considered in years, Simone. She worked the JFK route for nearly a decade. Always early, always over-prepared. She vanished after a minor altercation with a passenger, or so I'd heard. They said she retired early, I remembered telling someone. But Simone was 39. No kids, no spouse. She wasn't the type to disappear. She was the type to challenge things that didn't sit right. And Darlene? She hated that. She didn't retire, I whispered. She was reassigned, quietly, just like always. The plane dipped lower. Seatbelt signs dinged. I pulled out my notebook again. This time, I didn't hesitate. I flipped back to the list I'd started and underlined the words, Flight 287 twice. Then, I turned the page and wrote across the top. Names, incidents, times. Underneath, I began. Simone L., JFK crew, Flight 217, May 2021. Reported for passenger escalation, removed final message. They made it clear, speak and disappear. I didn't know where this list would go. I just knew it needed to exist. Some people post screenshots, some speak to cameras. Me? I build timelines. Some people scream into microphones, I wrote in the margin. Some build dossiers. I paused, staring at those words. I've always been better at the second. As the landing gear dropped beneath us with a thump, I clicked my pen shut and slid the notebook back into my bag. I didn't feel brave, not exactly, but I felt ready. That's when another voice, a different one, lower, older, bent close beside me as he passed. It was the senior flight attendant, gray at the temples, calm in his posture. He didn't stop walking, just kept going and said, under his breath, I just want you to know. Some of us are waiting for someone like you to say it first. I didn't answer. I didn't nod. But I did close the notebook again, slowly, with both hands. Not like I was hiding something, but like I was sealing it. Then I'll be the first, I whispered, but not the last. By the time I stepped off the jet bridge and into the terminal at O'Hare, the early morning light was breaking through the skyline in streaks of steel and amber. Most travelers were still blinking sleep out of their eyes, dragging bags and kids and bad tempers through security lines or toward coffee kiosks. But me, I walked with a purpose. No stops for baggage claim, no glance toward ground transportation. I turned left out of the gate and took the elevator up to the first-class lounge. It was half full, quiet except for the low hum of TVs and the occasional clink of a spoon against ceramic. I chose the corner booth, farthest from the windows but still facing the tarmac. I wanted space, but I also wanted visibility. Strategic, not emotional. I didn't need pity. I needed momentum. I pulled out my iPad and started typing. Subject: Flight 287. Immediate concern, body. I've seen enough. Please arrange a meeting room at HQ, today. Maribel Travers, strategic owner. Tier 1 Aviation Holdings. No fluff, no background story. I knew what I was doing, and I wasn't giving them time to pretend they didn't know me anymore. For a moment, I stared at the screen. Not out of doubt. Just to feel the power of that last line. My name, followed by a title Darlene had spent years pretending didn't exist. I hit send. There's something precise about knowing your words will land exactly where they need to. No hashtags, no tears. Just a clean directive with consequences folded inside. I leaned back slightly, letting the hum of the lounge settle around me. Businessmen dozed with neck pillows. Someone was video calling their kid. Over near the window, a woman in a navy dress tapped on her MacBook like she was editing her life in real time. I remembered another time I hit send, years ago. A formal complaint against our former COO, a man who was careful about where he placed his hands and which jokes he told depending on the room. No one thought he'd be removed, but I didn't need belief. I needed proof. And when I gave them that, he was gone within a week. I hadn't spoken at that meeting either. I just laid the file on the table and waited. Some people think justice has to shout, but sometimes it just arrives. On time. In writing. You didn't say a word, a voice said behind me. I looked up. It was the older flight attendant from the plane, the one who'd passed me with that subtle comment before landing. He didn't sit, just hovered near the edge of the table. But I read the silence, he added. I won't be silent much longer, I said, folding my hands. He nodded slowly. We'll back you, just say when. I gave him a small smile. It wasn't victory. It wasn't closure. But it was the first moment in a very long time that I didn't feel like I was speaking into a vacuum. He walked away without another word. For the next few minutes, I just sat there, letting the quiet settle in a way that felt earned. I took one last sip of the too bitter lounge coffee, closed the iPad, and checked my phone. New message. From HQ. Subject. Confirmed. Meeting room 214. Body 11:30 a.m. We've heard things. This isn't just about Darlene anymore, is it? I stared at the words. This isn't just about Darlene anymore. No, it wasn't. Not since they moved the old woman in the aisle seat. Not since Simone vanished off the JFK route. Not since I realized Darlene's weapon wasn't her voice, but the silence of the people around her. I tucked the phone into my blazer pocket, stood, and adjusted the strap of my bag. Justice wasn't a concept anymore. It was a calendar invite. I walked through the terminal like I'd done it 100 times before, shoulders squared, steps even. But this time, I wasn't heading toward a gate. I was heading toward a room where people used to speak about me as if I wasn't in it. That would change today. A staff member in a navy vest met me at the lounge entrance. He didn't ask for my ID. He didn't ask who I was there to see. He just nodded once and said, "Follow me." The hallway they led me down was quiet. White walls, frosted glass doors, the faint scent of lemon cleaner and stale coffee. We turned left, and I saw it. Conference room 214. My name was already on the screen outside the door, but I didn't go in right away. Through the glass, I saw her. Darlene. She was standing near the beverage counter, holding a paper cup with both hands, talking to a junior coordinator, like she was conducting a charm seminar. Her voice carried just enough for me to catch the end of a sentence. It's always about perception. Some people just don't carry it well. That's when he arrived. A man in his 40s, pressed suit, earpiece tucked behind one ear. Floor manager, probably. The kind that makes decisions with a glance. The kind Darlene usually wrapped around her finger in under 5 minutes. He walked in without knocking. "Ms. Darlene," he said, not raising his voice, not even glancing at the junior. "You just insulted the boss." Everything stopped. The paper cup in her hand tilted slightly. Her jaw moved before sound caught up. "Excuse me?" she said, with that smile she always used when she was pretending something was funny instead of offensive. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." He didn't blink. "No, I don't think there has." He gestured toward the corner of the room. That's when I stepped inside. Slowly, quietly, but with full presence. Darlene turned. She saw me, and for a half second, I saw it. Realization, then denial, then the flicker of panic she always tried to swallow. "Maribel?" Her voice broke around the edges. "That's the first time you've said my name aloud in 10 years, I said, without raising mine. She took a step toward me. "I had no idea you were... Why didn't you say anything? We could have..." "If someone needs a title to be treated with basic respect," I interrupted, "they're not worth the respect in return." No one moved. The coordinator, who had been standing beside her, took a small step back. She looked at Darlene like she was seeing a crack in marble for the first time. Darlene looked around the room, as if searching for someone, anyone, who'd step in, save her, speak for her. But the silence was airtight. She started again. "If I had known..." "This isn't about what you knew," I cut in. "It's about what you built, what you got away with because no one pushed back." Her mouth opened, closed. The floor manager tapped something on his phone, looked up. "The board just confirmed. They'll be reviewing your entire conduct record, effective immediately." That's when she really saw it. The point of no return. She looked at me, voice smaller now. "I didn't know it was you." I took a breath, held it for a moment, then let it out slow. "That's the problem," I said. "You only act decent when it is." And I turned. I didn't wait for her response. I didn't need it, because this time I was the one deciding who stayed in the room. The morning sun crawled across the hotel carpet like it was in no rush. I wasn't either. Not until my phone buzzed so hard it nearly slid off the nightstand. 32 missed calls, over 500 notifications. A text from Ellery. "Brace yourself, you're trending." I opened my inbox. Then Twitter. No, X, now. The video played before I even touched it. Darlene, in full uniform, standing straight-backed at the gate. Her voice clipped, clear. "You're not on the manifest for first class. Please step aside." And there I was, visibly confused, holding my boarding pass, stepping back. The caption read, "Flight attendant removes woman from first class because she doesn't look the part." The video had over 2.3 million views and counting. Thousands of comments. Reposts with headlines like, "Corporate bias in the skies," and "She bought the ticket. She owns the airline." One pinned comment said, "They judged her by her clothes. Turns out she owns the plane." I watched it twice, not because I enjoyed seeing myself, but because for once, people weren't seeing the version of me my sister curated. They were seeing me as I was, calm, stunned, and standing my ground in the face of someone who'd trained her whole life to erase me. TV anchors were debating it now, split screens, one side defending standard procedure, the other calling it what it was, aesthetic discrimination. On a talk radio clip someone forwarded, a caller said, "If you look like a certain type, you get treated like you paid less, even when you paid more." I couldn't argue with that. I scrolled until my thumbs ached. Most comments were supportive, some confused, a few skeptical. The usual digital mix. But then I saw it. What cracked something open inside me. A repost of the video with a side-by-side. On one side, the clip of Darlene removing me. On the other, my LinkedIn profile. Title, Strategic Owner, Tier 1 Aviation Holdings. The internet had connected the dots faster than HR ever could. I didn't have to tell them I belonged. They saw it for themselves. A chime. New message from Ellery. Subject. "We found something attached," was a PDF. Internal email. From Darlene P. To Cabin Crew, Image Control Committee. Subject, Cabin Image Protocol, Excerpted lines. First class is our face-forward branding. Avoid overweight, underdressed, or tattoo types. Adjust seatings if needed. Be subtle. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just something she thought. It was something she wrote, something she circulated. She hadn't just acted on bias. She'd institutionalized it. I read it again, slower this time. It wasn't an attitude, I whispered. It was a documented system. Suddenly, everything snapped into place. The reassignments, the people quietly shuffled, the subtle power moves disguised as professionalism. She'd created a culture where exclusion felt like order. I set the tablet down, stared out the window. Chicago's skyline looked jagged, sharp, appropriate. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number, text. I was pushed out for not enforcing that protocol. If you speak, I'll back you. I have logs. I sat up straighter, reread the message. It was happening. One voice becomes two, two become 20. And eventually, it becomes undeniable. But before I could even respond, another notification flashed. Incoming call. Mom. I didn't need to guess what it was about. She wasn't calling to ask how I was, or to say she was proud. She was calling because I'd embarrassed her other daughter. I let the phone ring twice before I answered. Not because I was hesitant, but because I already knew how this would go. I wasn't preparing for impact. I was bracing for the familiar rhythm of guilt dressed up as concern. Is it true? She asked the moment I picked up. No greeting, just sharp. Did you make that scene public? I stood by the window of my hotel room, still in the clothes from the day before, watching the glow of early evening turn the skyline amber. The TV played on mute behind me, flashing clips of news anchors and headlines about airline bias and corporate conduct. I didn't make anything public, I said. It went public because people saw it. She exhaled in that slow, judgmental way she used to when I brought home report cards with anything less than an A. You've embarrassed your sister, she said, her voice tightening. She's worked so hard to get where she is. All these years. Don't you think she deserves a little grace? I blinked. That's what this was. Not concern for me, not even curiosity, just damage control for Darlene. So did I replied quietly. You should have spoken to her in private. You could have handled this without spectacle. Spectacle? I echoed. She pulled me out of first class, in front of a full gate. That was the spectacle. You're twisting it. No, I'm naming it. She paused, then tried another angle. More cutting, more maternal. Family doesn't air its laundry in public. And family doesn't drag their own blood out of a cabin like they're smuggling shame. I said flatly. Silence. Not the kind that heals. The kind that waits for you to recant. To feel small again. I didn't fill it. You've always had a problem with Darlene's success, she said finally. Ever since she got promoted. Ever since people started respecting her. She earned respect by cutting people out of the picture, I snapped. She built her story by making sure I had no voice in it. I'm not doing this with you, she muttered. You already are, I said, then paused. But not for long. The tone shifted. The kind of shift that happens when a parent realizes their child isn't asking for permission anymore. You've made your choice then. No, I replied. She did. I'm just finally responding to it. There was one last attempt. Just think about how this looks. I looked at my reflection in the window. Tired, maybe. But upright. Still standing. I have, I said, for most of my life. She didn't answer. Not immediately. And when she finally did, her voice was small. Do what you want. Then the line went dead. I held the phone to my ear for a second longer than necessary, then set it down gently on the windowsill. I didn't cry. Not because it didn't sting, but because I'd already bled out from this wound a long time ago. All she did was open a scar I'd stopped pretending would heal. And yet, there was peace in that too. My phone buzzed again. No name this time, just unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Hello? A woman's voice came through, steady and deliberate, older, worn. "I used to work under her," she said. No need to specify who. We both knew. "I've got documents, screenshots, statements. I've been waiting for someone like you." I didn't rush to speak. I let her words fill the room. "Thank you," I said. "Let's talk." After the call ended, I walked the 2 blocks from the hotel to a quiet cafe on the corner, the kind with brick walls, good lighting, and baristas who don't ask questions. I slid into a booth facing the window, set down my coffee, untouched, and opened my phone. Notifications were still flooding in, news alerts, mentions, messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. But one stood out. A video link from Ellery, marked only, "Thought you'd want to see this?" I tapped it. The clip opened to a familiar face, Darlene. Flawless as always. A single tear tracked the edge of her eyeliner. She sat across from a local reporter, hands folded in her lap, posture rigid but softened by the tissue in her hand, monogrammed and perfectly placed. "I didn't know she was my sister," she said, voice cracking. "I never would have treated her like that if I'd known." I watched, still as stone. "She was dressed casually," Darlene continued. "I thought she was just a walk-up passenger. It was a misunderstanding, a policy I didn't make." A misunderstanding. It wasn't rage that rose in me. It was fatigue, the kind that seeps into your bones when someone lies with such polish, such practiced ease. You wonder if they actually believe it themselves. I turned up the volume just slightly. The reporter nodded empathetically, as if Darlene were the victim. Overlay text flashed on the screen. "Veteran flight attendant speaks out after viral humiliation scandal." Comments scrolled across the live stream. "She's human. We all make mistakes." "This is cancel culture. She said she was sorry." "She didn't know. Why are people so cruel?" But one caught my eye. "She never cried for her sister. She cried for the camera." And that was it. That one line cracked something in me. Not from anger, but recognition. Because I'd seen her cry before, when she got caught spreading a rumor in high school and needed sympathy to dodge suspension. When she found out Grandpa had left me a box of handwritten letters, then turned around and said he'd always favored her. She'd cried at his funeral too, loudly, visibly, after hiding every single one of those letters from the rest of the family. Tears were her specialty. They didn't mean remorse. They meant defense, manipulation, mascara, and just the right amount of tremble. "She weaponizes guilt," I muttered to myself, "dresses harm in mascara and a quiver in her voice." I scrolled back to the beginning of the video, watched her dab the corner of her eye again. Exact same timing, same hand, same pause before exhale. A performance. Nothing more. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let the hum of the cafe buzz around me. A table of retirees debating the game last night, a young couple sharing one pair of earbuds, a server laughing too hard at a joke she'd clearly heard before. The world kept moving, even as mine reshaped. I checked my messages again, expecting more noise, but what I found was quieter. A direct message, no profile picture, no name. The text read, "You're not wrong." She cried when she buried my complaint too. I still have the original files. Want them? I stared at the screen for a few seconds, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then I typed one word. Yes. By the next morning, I was already in Austin. The flight was early and uneventful, which felt like a small gift from the universe. I kept my headphones in the whole way. No music, just silence. My seatmate didn't ask questions. I didn't offer conversation. And when we landed, I didn't bother with a rental car. A company car was waiting at the curb. The driver didn't speak much. I appreciated that. When we pulled into the Tier 1 headquarters, I didn't hesitate. I walked through the glass front doors like I'd always belonged there. Because I did. Only this time, I wasn't walking in as someone hiding behind a title. I was walking in with receipts, with names, with proof. Ellery met me in the lobby. He looked tired, but steady. He handed me a visitor badge anyway, the kind that reads temp in red block letters. "Just optics," he said, raising an eyebrow. HR. I clipped it on. We took the elevator to the 6th floor. Conference room B. Neutral walls, long table, bottled water set out like offerings. 2 HR directors, 1 legal advisor, Ellery at the far end. No one said much. At exactly 11:32, the door opened. Darlene stepped in, 2 minutes late, full uniform, polished down to her posture, as if none of this had touched her, until she saw me. She paused mid-step. Her eyes darted from me to the badge on my chest, to Ellery, then back again. "You called this?" she asked, her tone tight but aiming for pleasant. I didn't blink. "No, the company did. I just provided the reason." She took her seat, smoothed her skirt, tilted her head like this was an HR training video. The compliance officer gestured toward me. "Ms. Trevors?" I reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, unlocked the screen, looked straight at the man seated beside the speaker. "I was sent this yesterday," I said calmly. "I haven't edited it." I tapped play. Darlene's voice filled the room, crisp, confident, unmistakable. "Maribel? She's just dead weight. No one listens to her. Hell, no one even remembers she works here. Let her sit in first class if she wants to pretend." Silence followed. Not polite, not reflective, just sharp and wide, like an open wound in the center of the table. Darlene shifted in her chair. Her throat moved once, twice, but no sound came. Finally, the HR director leaned forward. "Ms. Penrose, did you say these words?" Darlene gave a half laugh, the kind she used at cocktail events when someone asked her something uncomfortable. "It was a private joke, out of context. I didn't know I was being recorded." "It wasn't a joke to me," I said, steady. "Or to the people you've pushed out, or to the culture you cultivated." Ellery set a folder on the table with quiet precision. Printed screenshots, complaint records, incident reports, names. He opened it, flipping slowly. "We have statements from at least 6 employees," he said, "some dating back 3 years. Multiple passengers, redirection of assignments based on appearance, internal memos that match your language nearly verbatim." Darlene reached for the water bottle, unscrewed the cap, didn't drink it. "This is no longer about sibling rivalry," Ellery said. "This is about workplace discrimination, documented." She stared at the table. Legal cleared his throat. "We're moving forward with a formal suspension pending ethics review." I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. But out of the corner of my eye, I saw her mouth open, ready to respond, to cry, to craft a new version. Then close again. She had no script left. We didn't leave the room immediately after the announcement. Nobody did. There was that strange, tense stillness in the air, the kind that settles after something breaks, but before anyone decides who's going to clean it up. Darlene sat, hands folded, eyes lowered. No protest. No performance. Just silence. I walked out without a glance back. Ellery caught up with me 2 floors down in the executive hallway, just as I passed the glass-walled strategy suite. He didn't speak right away, just walked beside me like a colleague who knew when to let gravity speak first. Then, finally, he held up his phone. "Take a look," he said. "It just hit my inbox. You'll want to see this." The subject line, "Urgent, Tier 1, Image Management Center, Strategic Liaison, Sato Holdings, Japan." Ellery tapped the message open and handed me the phone. The body of the email was short, precise, surgical. "Given recent events and leaked internal policies related to staff appearance-based discrimination, Sato Holdings is currently reassessing all brand alignment with Tier 1 airlines. Your internal culture has become our external liability." That word stuck. Liability. It had taken less than 48 hours for something Darlene built over a decade to unravel. Not because of morality, because of optics. Back upstairs, the executive meeting was already forming. No press, no recordings. Just board members and department heads around a curved table that looked more like a dinner party than a crisis response. But no one looked relaxed. The CFO went first, voice low but sharp. If Sato Holdings pulls out, we're looking at a loss of 22% in Asia-Pacific routes. Immediate. Another exec chimed in, fingers tapping a tablet. We've had warnings before. We chose to ignore them. Ellery and I exchanged a glance. I stayed quiet a moment longer. Then I stood. I'm not here to gloat, I began, eyes steady. I'm here to make sure we stop bleeding from a wound we pretended didn't exist. No one interrupted me. This isn't just about one person, I continued. We let a culture grow that prioritized image over people. We measured professionalism by polish. And when employees were moved, dismissed, reassigned, it wasn't to fix systems, it was to protect branding. I laid out my proposal. They do now. I slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a certificate, lifetime upgrade access on any Tier 1 flight. No expiration, no blackout dates, and a personal note from the board. She stared at it for a few seconds before looking back at me. I didn't fight back then, she said, her voice catching. But you did. I didn't need you to post about it, I told her. I just needed you to heal. She didn't cry. She just folded the certificate slowly, like it was delicate and sacred. As I stepped out onto the sidewalk, a breeze cut through the afternoon sun. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't anonymous. Voicemail, from corporate legal. I pressed play. Maribel, Darlene's hearing is scheduled for Friday morning. You're invited. I stared out across the street as traffic rolled by, steady and unbothered. She would walk in late, just like always. But this time, no one would stand for her. Friday morning arrived like a held breath. The kind of morning that felt quieter than it should have. No birdsong, no honking horns, just an overcast sky, a faint drizzle tapping on the glass as I sipped coffee in the lobby of Tier 1 headquarters. The elevator dinged, and I rose without checking my watch. I didn't need to. The hearing had been scheduled for 10:00 sharp, and I had no intention of being even 1 minute behind it. The hearing room was tucked behind double wood-paneled doors on the 5th floor, an unmarked space, no windows, no signage. Inside, 6 board members sat spaced evenly along one side of a long lacquered table. A legal counsel, 1 HR rep. Ellery sat at the far end, calm, collected. I took my seat across from them. No one smiled, no one offered pleasantries. And then, at 10:04, the door creaked open. She walked in, not rushed, but late. Intentional. Darlene wore a navy blazer, blouse too crisp, pants tailored but slightly wrinkled at the knees. No wings pinned to her lapel. No name tag. Just a face that used to control a room and now barely registered. She glanced around, pausing for acknowledgement that didn't come. Not from me. Not from anyone. For once, I thought, the room wasn't built around her. She took the only remaining chair, farthest from the center, cleared her throat gently as if prepping a presentation, then folded her hands in her lap. The chair of the board began. The review was methodical, nothing theatrical, just a steady reading of findings, emails, audio recordings, passenger complaints, ethics violations, every red flag that had been buried until the flood exposed them. There were moments when Darlene's lips parted, like she might object or explain. But nothing came. Maybe she realized it wasn't her script to rewrite this time. Then it was my turn. Ms. Trevors, the chair said, would you like to speak before the board delivers its ruling? I looked down at the notepad in front of me. I had written something the night before. Half a page, sharp, factual, measured. But now I simply closed the pad. No, I said. Everything's already been said, just not heard, until now. A beat passed. Then the ruling came. Darlene Penrose. Terminated. License permanently revoked. Not eligible for rehire within the aviation network. She blinked rapidly, swallowed hard. But she didn't cry. And that, I realized, was the truest thing she'd done in years. When the session ended, we filed out without ceremony. No handshakes, no cameras. Just a slow procession of people who had seen too much and finally acted. Outside the room, the hallway echoed with the click of heels and the rustle of briefcases. I kept walking. There was no applause waiting, no warm validation, just a quiet I had earned. Justice, I thought, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it signs papers, closes folders, and moves on. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean, like I had stepped out of a storm and wasn't dripping anymore. Weeks later, I boarded a flight. Different route, same airline. This time, the crew greeted me kindly, not because they knew me, but because they treated every passenger like they belonged. I sat in first class, not out of defiance, but because it was my seat. Window 1A. The attendant offered me water with a smile. No tension, no scan, no pause. "Thank you," I said softly. Not because I needed to be polite, but because I meant it. And as I looked out the window at the runway stretching ahead, I whispered to myself, I didn't take this seat to prove anything. I took it because I belonged. And always did. Hi, I'm Milas. After graduation, I came home thinking I'd rest, regroup, maybe be welcomed back into the space I helped hold together. But the only thing waiting for me was a rolled-up mattress under the stairs, and silence. My parents gave my room to my sister, said she needed more space. No one asked me. Then I found my sketchbooks in trash bags. My college laptop wiped clean. They didn't scream at me. They didn't kick me out. They just slowly erased me. So I moved next door and built a pool. But want to know what they did after that? Because the worst part wasn't sleeping on the floor. It's what they said when I was finally gone. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same. White trim, blue shutters, flower pots Vera replaced every spring like clockwork. But something in me knew it wasn't. Not anymore. I sat in the car a minute longer than I needed to. Let the AC run while the engine idled, just long enough for the silence to tell me what words wouldn't. The front door opened. Vera didn't wave. She didn't come running like mothers do in those videos where kids surprise them after graduation. She just stood there, arms crossed over an apron she probably hadn't taken off since breakfast, and said, "You're here. Good." I grabbed my duffel and walked up the steps. Roland was behind her, holding a cup of coffee, eyes fixed on the TV behind me, instead of his daughter returning with a degree. No one asked how the ceremony went. No one said congratulations. Vera turned and walked inside before I even reached the door. Inside, the air was cool but sharp. The smell of lemon cleaner still lingered in the hallway. Familiar but sterile. My body knew every corner of this house, but that day, it didn't feel like mine anymore. She led me past the living room, where Callista's books were spread out like she'd claimed the entire surface as a library annex, and gestured toward the stair alcove. There, beneath the stairs, was a mattress. Thin, rolled up in a faded plaid sheet I hadn't seen since high school sleepovers. A pillow sat on top like a punctuation mark to whatever sentence this was supposed to be. "This will be your spot for now," Vera said without blinking. "Callista's LSAT prep needs full focus." I didn't say a word. Roland cleared his throat behind me, then muttered, "It's temporary. You know how your sister needs structure." I nodded once, said nothing. That night, while they sat at the dinner table talking about law school rankings, I lay on the floor. It was colder than I remembered. Not the tile, the treatment. The way I'd been downgraded from daughter to houseguest in the span of one sentence. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I knew this house rewarded silence and punished the opposite. The next morning, I heard laughter from down the hall. I followed the sound, walked past the stairwell, and stopped outside what used to be my room. The door was wide open, new lighting, whiteboard on the wall, acrylic desk with gold legs, a corkboard pinned with motivational quotes. Callista stood beside Vera, both beaming as they posed for photos. The caption went up within minutes. "Proud to support our future lawyer, Sheeter Girlboss Callista." I stood in the hallway, unseen, while they celebrated the transfer of ownership like it was a real estate deal. Callista caught a glimpse of me in the reflection of the mirror and turned slightly. "I've needed this space for years," she said. "It's nice to finally have room to breathe." Vera laughed, adjusting a frame on the wall. "You deserve it, honey. You've worked so hard. The other one can sleep anywhere. The other one, not even my name, like I was a line item that had been quietly deleted." That night, I waited until the house had gone quiet before tiptoeing to the kitchen. I found a paper plate of cold spaghetti left on the counter. No note. No apology for forgetting I hadn't eaten. I sat alone, across from the TV Roland had left on mute. He always did that. Turn the sound down instead of turning the conversation up. Vera walked in briefly to refill her water. "We'll need you to keep things tidy while you figure out your next move," she said, as if I'd walked in off the street and asked for temporary shelter. On my way back to the mattress, I noticed my old World's Best Daughter mug holding a handful of spatulas in Callista's new room. I lay down, pulled the blanket over me, stared at the ceiling. Above me, her Spotify playlist played through the wall like a victory anthem. My spine ached, not from the floor, but from how deeply I had allowed them to see me as low maintenance. By morning, my back had molded to the floor's shape, every muscle stiff like I'd slept on concrete. I shuffled toward the kitchen, trying not to wake anyone, though part of me hoped I would. Let them see me stepping over my own dignity. The coffee machine groaned louder than usual. I reached for a mug, but the cabinet was nearly empty. I grabbed a chipped one with a faded cartoon owl, Callista's old study buddy cup. Ironic. As the pot dripped, I leaned against the counter and glanced up at the family calendar Vera kept taped to the fridge. She loved planning. Color-coded markers, cute stickers, every birthday, dentist appointment, HOA meeting labeled and circled. July stared back at me. Roland, July 3rd. The cat, July 12th. Callista, August 2nd, but somehow still had a giant gold star. My name wasn't there. I checked again, like I'd missed it somehow. I hadn't. Vera walked in wearing the same bathrobe she'd had since I was in high school, flipping through mail. I kept my tone even. "Did we change calendars?" She didn't even glance up. "Oh, I guess I forgot to add yours. You're an adult now, right?" I didn't respond, just turned back to the coffee, pretending I hadn't heard what I'd heard. But my birthday wasn't something you forgot. It was something you erased. Later that evening, after dinner, which I cooked, by the way, I curled up in my corner beneath the stairs with my laptop. I scrolled social media while the house fell quiet. Notifications lit up the screen, mostly ads, and a few congratulatory comments for Callista's latest mock LSAT score. Then I saw it. A Christmas post from Vera. The picture had been taken last year, in the living room. We were all there, me on the edge of the couch, Roland holding the cat, Callista in the center. I remembered that day. I had worn a sweater I thought Vera would like. The caption read, "Grateful for family, just us three." I checked the tags. Roland. Callista. No, Mylis. The comments made my throat tighten. "Beautiful family, just 3 of you now?" And below that, a heart emoji from Vera. Not a correction, not a clarification, just a quiet nod. My face was still in the photo, but I had been digitally erased, the way people crop out X's in old memories. It wasn't grief, it wasn't resentment, it was strategy. The next day, the weather turned warm enough to open windows. I sat on the porch step just after dusk, sipping cold tea. Across the fence, Vera's voice floated through the hedges as she chatted with our neighbor, Mrs. Hartley. "Callista's doing amazing. It's her time to shine now," Vera said brightly. "Mylis? She's still finding herself." I froze. Mrs. Hartley replied, with that uncomfortable hum people make when they don't know what else to say. You could hear the shift in energy like someone dimmed a light. "They didn't forget me," I whispered to myself. "They chose not to see me, and in doing that, they made sure everyone else stopped seeing me too." Back inside, the house smelled like leftover pasta and lemon cleaner, No one spoke to me that evening. Callista was on FaceTime in her room. Vera folded towels in silence. Roland watched a documentary in the den, volume just loud enough to pretend he didn't hear anything else. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen to grab my charger. On the counter sat a cake box from that bakery Callista liked, the kind with gold ribbon and a wax seal on the front. Written on the box, in Vera's handwriting, "To Clarissa, our star." I stood there for a long time. My birthday was in 5 days. Nobody said a word. I didn't touch the cake box, just stared at it long enough to memorize the handwriting. Vera had taken her time on the lettering. Neat, slanted, almost proud. Like she was etching her approval into sugar and frosting. I slipped my charger into my bag and walked out without saying anything. The air outside was heavy, thick with early summer heat, and everything I hadn't said. The next morning was a Sunday, quiet in the way that used to feel peaceful. Now it just echoed. I walked into the kitchen again, hoping for coffee, and maybe silence that didn't hurt. Roland was in his usual spot on the couch, half watching a golf tournament, half dozing with the remote balanced on his stomach. I lingered by the sink before finally asking, "Dad, do you think I'll get back on my feet soon?" He blinked at the TV, didn't look my way. "Things have a way of working out, kiddo. You just gotta ride the wave." I waited. Nothing else came. No, "You've got this." No, "We're proud of you." Not even a glance. He didn't throw me out, but he also didn't ask me to stay. After lunch, I stepped out the side door to shake off the weight in my chest. That side yard had always been a place where forgotten things collected. Old planters, broken pool toys, busted folding chairs. This time, it was my turn. Near the garbage bin sat a box, medium-sized, worn, marked in black Sharpie like something out of a yard sale. My Ellis. Old books, art junk. At first, I thought maybe it was something Vera had pulled from the attic, something she'd meant to donate and forgot. But the handwriting was recent. Clean, fresh ink. I knelt down and peeled the top open. Sketchbooks from college, including my final portfolio. The small lava lamp I'd used in my dorm. And a birthday card, still sealed, from Aunt Narita. I knew that envelope. She always used the ones with the floral print borders. The weight of it all hit slower than I expected. No rage, just realization. They were packing up pieces of my life like it was clutter, expired inventory that no longer served their aesthetic. I left the box where it was. Back inside, I walked past Callista's room. The door was half open, her voice floating out as she practiced an opening statement into her phone like some faux courtroom. On the door, a custom nameplate read, "Callista R. Simmons, Future JD." Someone had printed it and laminated it. Vera's touch, no doubt. I kept walking, eyes straight ahead, heading back toward my corner under the stairs. Vera was coming from the laundry room, arms full of sheets. She stopped just long enough to say, "Can you keep the stair area clear today? It's getting a little cramped when the laundry's out." She said it without malice. No snide tone, just casual, like asking someone to move their shoes. I nodded. Didn't argue. Just filed it away. That night, I pulled out my sketchbook, the one they hadn't found yet, and opened to a blank page. I didn't draw, didn't plan. I wrote one line in pen so firm it bled through to the next sheet. She chose Callista, Dad let her. Then I closed the book and turned off the light. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The house was still, quiet in that eerie way right before something cracks. I gathered my things to head out for a coffee, not because I needed the caffeine, but because I needed a reason to be somewhere else. The library was a 15-minute walk. I liked passing the bakery on the corner, the one that smelled like sugar and memory. Callista used to beg for their cinnamon rolls when we were kids. Now she just ordered protein bars online. I stopped by the coffee shop across the street, ordered a black drip, and tapped my card against the reader. Declined. I tried again, slower. Like that would change the outcome. Declined. Want to try another? The barista asked politely, but loud enough for the woman behind me to hear. I fumbled for my phone, logged into my banking app. The screen took longer than usual to load. Then it showed the message that burned through my chest. Account closed by Guardian. It was the same account Vera had helped me open in high school. She'd called it my safety net, said it was there for emergencies, for the unexpected. I guess I didn't realize I had become the emergency. I left the coffee on the counter, walked outside with nothing but questions in my hands. That afternoon, Vera announced we were having a family talk after dinner. She even made lemonade and brought out the good cookies, the ones from the bakery she only used for holidays and Callista's achievements. We sat around the table like strangers playing house. Roland flipped his phone screen down, a silent declaration that he wouldn't be helpful. Callista had a highlighter in her hand, underlining something on a law prep sheet like the rest of us weren't there. Vera leaned back, crossed her legs, and smiled. So, I know we've had a bit of a rough patch, but I'd really like us to keep things light. Callista's mock scores came in, top 5%. Isn't that amazing? I looked down at the table. My hands were steady, but my voice had to fight through a layer of disbelief. You closed my bank account, I said flatly. Vera didn't flinch. It was under my name. It wasn't a forever thing. You didn't even tell me, I replied. She sipped her lemonade. Let's not bring that energy here. We're trying to keep this house positive. Positive. That word, like my frustration was a toxin, like I was something they had to scrub clean to keep the vibe right. Roland didn't say a word, just folded a napkin into smaller and smaller squares. Callista smiled behind her glass. Maybe this is your sign to finally start something on your own. I stared at her, at them. This wasn't a conversation, it was a verdict. Later that night, I climbed the stairs slowly, past the closed door that used to be mine. A sign now hung outside. Callista's study zone, do not disturb. It was laminated. I kept walking. Back at the bottom of the stairs, I sat on the floor and opened my sketch pad again. No doodles this time, no poetic lines. Just the truth. When you're labeled a problem for pointing out pain, you learn to stop sharing. And maybe that's what they wanted all along. Not to help me heal, but to make sure I stayed quiet enough not to embarrass them. I pulled out my laptop, opened a blank spreadsheet, and titled it, Steps to Independence, Phase 1. I started with what I had, listed my shifts at the diner, my design clients, my savings, what little remained. I didn't know what I was building yet, but I knew it wouldn't have their names on it. The days blurred after that. Between shifts at the diner and late nights sorting design files, I barely had time to breathe, much less feel. But something had shifted inside me. I wasn't waiting for their permission anymore. I was building something that didn't require it. That Wednesday, I came home early from a client consult. They'd needed help visualizing a new brand for their gardening service, and for the first time in weeks, I'd left a meeting feeling seen, valued. Like what I made had weight. The sun was still out, casting sharp lines through the side hallway as I stepped through the laundry door. I almost didn't notice it at first, the black trash bag tucked beside the washer. Ordinary, out of place only because it had my name written on it in thick marker. Mayless. Old clothes, art stuff. I froze. For a second, I told myself it must be a mix-up. Maybe Vera had boxed something for donation and grabbed the wrong bag. But the handwriting was hers. Sharp, tidy, deliberate. I knelt and opened it. On top, my senior portfolio, still bound in the blue folder I had used for my final critique. Below it, my high school art medals. Not many, but they had once meant something. At the bottom, a bent envelope. The card Nerida had given me last birthday, still sealed. I'd kept it tucked away for when I needed a reminder that someone in this family still saw me. And now it sat in a bag meant for the curb. I stood in the kitchen doorway for a moment before walking in. Vera was at the sink, rinsing strawberries. Callista sat at the island scrolling on her phone. Who moved my things? I asked. Vera didn't look up. We needed to make space. You hadn't touched those in years. Callista chuckled softly. I thought that lava lamp died back in college. I didn't respond. I didn't give them the pleasure of reaction. But I saw it clearly now. They weren't throwing me out in one dramatic act. They were dismantling me quietly, one object at a time. That evening, I passed by the dining table as Vera sorted through envelopes. A cousin's wedding was coming up. I paused to glance at the stack, white with gold trim, classic. One caught my eye. The ink looked smeared. I reached for it. My name had been written, then crossed out. Below it, in cleaner ink, Callista. That was mine, I said, holding up the envelope. You're not going, are you? Vera asked. Callista's representing the family. Callista didn't even look up. It's more my crowd anyway. I stared at the paper. It wasn't just an oversight. It was a reassignment. Like my spot in the family was transferable. Optional. I walked out without another word. Later that night, I sat on the porch. The air was thick with June heat and the hum of mosquitoes near the screen. I opened my laptop and typed slowly, methodically. Exit strategy. Independent within 90 days. I listed every shift I could pick up, every freelance contact I hadn't yet reached out to. I wrote down my weekly grocery budget, canceled every subscription that wasn't a necessity. Then I printed it, folded the sheet once, wrote in all caps across the top. This time, they don't decide. I went to bed just before midnight. As I passed the back door, I glanced at the laundry corner again. The trash bag was gone. But through the side window, near the curb, I saw it. Set out with the others. That morning, I couldn't stop checking Zillow. Not for escape fantasies or faraway listings in places I'd never afford. Just curiosity. Local homes, nearby streets. I told myself it was harmless. I wasn't going anywhere. I didn't have the money. But something in me was restless. An itch under my skin that I couldn't explain away anymore. After lunch, I took a walk. I told Vera I needed fresh air. She didn't look up from her tablet. It had been weeks since I walked the block without rushing somewhere. The neighborhood felt smaller now, like it had shrunk without my permission. Most of the houses looked just as I remembered them. Neatly trimmed lawns, porch flags, wind chimes still spinning in slow motion. But then I saw it. Next door. A wooden post had been hammered into the lawn, slightly crooked. The sign was red and white. For sale, open house this weekend. I stopped walking. It was the old Jensen house, the one with the pale blue shutters, overgrown hydrangeas, and a gate that always squeaked no matter how much you oiled it. I used to play there as a kid. Hide and seek in the backyard, popsicles on the porch. It had been empty for years. But now, I stood at the edge of the sidewalk staring at it, heart thudding. It wasn't just a house. It was next to theirs. Not with them, but visible. Side by side, but separate. The thought planted itself like a seed. That evening, I sat on the back steps as the sun folded into the trees. Vera stood in the garden, clipping dead leaves with the neighbor, Mrs. Renly. They didn't see me sitting quietly by the screen door. They rarely did. She's just staying temporarily, Vera said, voice light, like this was a weather update. Callista's the one really building a future. She's got direction, that's the difference. Mrs. Renly hummed her agreement, or at least didn't object. That was the safest thing to do with people like Vera. Nod, smile, avoid the mess. I didn't cry, I didn't flinch. That sentence was a verdict. It wasn't spoken in anger. It was said with certainty, like she was reporting the news, like it was settled. She wasn't clarifying my place. She was erasing it, just softly enough not to be called cruel. That night, I crawled into my corner beneath the stairs and stared at the laptop screen until my eyes burned. I opened a new tab, typed First-Time Homebuyer Resources. Another tab, FHA Loans, Texas. Then, Freelance Design Average Income, and another, How to Estimate Renovation Costs. I read for hours. Then I pulled out a piece of scrap paper from the bottom of my bag and drew a rectangle, added a desk, a window, a bookshelf. Then I drew a small patio and a pool. Not a big one, just enough for one person. Enough to float, breathe. It wasn't for guests. It wasn't for Instagram. It was for me. They'd never give me a seat at their table. I'd accepted that, but I could build one next door. And when I sat down, it would be because I chose the chair, not because someone pulled it out for me. The next morning, while reheating old coffee, my phone buzzed. An alert from Zillow. Price drop, 4278, Magnolia Lane, now listed at $172,900. I stared at it. Then, quietly, I smiled. The price drop buzzed in my pocket all day. I didn't reply to the alert, didn't bookmark the listing, but the numbers sat with me, burned themselves into the back of my mind like a dare I wasn't sure I was allowed to accept. That night, I was reviewing brand sketches for a new client, a florist who wanted to reintroduce her business after 20 years of word of mouth. She was sweet, blunt, and didn't care about hashtags. Just wanted her story to be seen again. While exporting the files, I mindlessly opened Instagram. Big mistake. The screen opened to Callista's story. She was filming a room tour. My old room. From junk room to glam zone, she said, camera panning over white furniture, fairy lights, a wall of Polaroids, none of which included me. We had to totally start from scratch. The energy in here used to be so stale. Vera laughed in the background. It was a mess. We barely saved anything. They didn't just redecorate. They erased, painted over my memory like I'd been a bad stain. I watched the whole video, twice. Her caption sealed it. Choose new era, or glow up. Make space for what matters. Not a single word about who lived there first, about the girl who slept under the stairs while they built this new shrine. I wasn't even angry yet. I was stunned. They made it content. The next night, I opened Instagram again. I don't know why. Maybe I hoped I'd misread it all. Maybe I wanted proof that it wasn't as cruel as it felt. Instead, I saw her post. A black background, white script. Some people are chapters, others are the whole story. Caption, know your role. Some people just fill space. The comments rolled in like confetti. Yes! Say it louder for the ones still hanging around. You're everything, girl. I didn't comment. I didn't like it. But I saved the post, not because I needed a reminder of what she said, but because someday someone would ask me why I left, and I wanted to show them the answer. I sat with that for a while, then opened a new file on my computer and began piecing together a mood board for my next client, a landscaping company needing a new brand. But halfway through, I renamed the project, Presence Without Permission. The collage started forming around the edges. A keyhole, a small backyard patio, a woman's silhouette standing in her own doorway, holding nothing but a coffee cup and her own piece. I added the word threshold, then blueprint, then view. At the top, in white sans serif, the person they thought wouldn't fight back is building a view they can't block. I stared at it for a while, hands still on the keyboard, then leaned back and closed my eyes. It wasn't anger anymore. It was strategy. Later that night, I got an email from a new lead. Loved your work for Bloom & Root. I'm launching a small interior brand, interested in logo and full visual identity. Budget approved. I read the message twice, smiled. They weren't done erasing me, but they no longer controlled the narrative. By sunrise, I had already dressed, packed, and folded the lease draft twice before slipping it into my backpack. The house was still. That particular kind of quiet that didn't feel earned, just imposed. I walked down the hallway with calm I hadn't felt in years. My feet moved without hesitation, and yet my heart held a steady, cool beat. I paused at the side cabinet near the laundry room. That's where I kept everything that mattered. Birth certificate, tax forms, and my emergency envelope. It was always locked. Until today. The latch clicked open with no effort. Inside, my files were shuffled. One folder was missing entirely. The envelope was gone. Not moved. Not buried. Gone. I stood there longer than I probably should have, waiting to hear someone explain. But the hallway stayed silent, smug, and still. Vera was in the kitchen, wiping down the counters like it was just another morning. Callista was on the phone, her voice saccharine and loud, something about brand opportunities and targeting Gen Z engagement. Roland sat nearby, flipping through the newspaper like it was still 1995. I walked in and set my hand on the back of a chair. "Did you open my drawer?" I asked. Vera didn't flinch. "It's my house. You don't get to claim corners." Callista laughed like I'd told a joke. "No," I said, voice steady. "I asked a real question." Vera turned to face me then. Her face held that familiar tone, the one she wore during parent-teacher conferences and HOA meetings. Civil, prepared. "You shouldn't leave things lying around if they're that important." It wasn't lying around. It was locked. But facts didn't matter in this house, not if they made anyone else look bad. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just walked out and shut the door gently behind me. At the diner that evening, I was halfway through my shift when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Financial services. I stepped into the back hallway near the dish pit and answered. "Hi, this is Megan with FAFSA Processing. We're following up about your recent application. Looks like your guarantor has been removed. The refinancing can't proceed without a new one in place." My chest went cold. "Wait, what?" "Looks like the parent signature was revoked. You'll need to reapply as an independent." I logged into my account as soon as I got off the call. There it was. Vera's name, gone. A red alert flashing across the screen. Application denied. Below that, in clean blue font, Clarissa Simmons, financially independent, verified. It didn't take a genius to figure it out. They didn't just stop supporting me. They handed the whole playbook to Callista. My mother hadn't just stepped back. She'd switched teams. Back home, I didn't waste time. I walked straight past the kitchen. Didn't wait for a pause in Callista's call. Didn't acknowledge Vera as she loaded the dishwasher. I went to my corner, grabbed my duffel, pulled out the printed lease from my bag. I folded a towel slowly, deliberately. I packed only what was mine. No borrowed chargers, no shared mugs, nothing that could be debated later. I pulled my key off my lanyard and set it on the kitchen table. No one looked up. I didn't say goodbye. There was nothing left to end. They had stopped calling it home long before I ever dared to leave. I walked down the front path without hesitation. The porch light flickered behind me like it always did. A glitch no one ever cared to fix. The night air wrapped around me, calm and sure. I didn't turn back. The next morning, Vera opened the fridge to reach for the orange juice. A post-it note stared back at her, stuck squarely in the middle of the carton. In my handwriting, "I'm not yours to edit." The morning after I left, I took my coffee out to the porch of the villa, my porch now, and sat barefoot on the top step. The quiet was different here, less choreographed. I didn't have to listen for footsteps or silence my own. I could just exist. The lavender plants I'd placed in recycled pots lined the edge of the walkway, still recovering from their transplant shock. Kind of like me. I finished the last sip and headed out for a client meeting across town. The coffee shop was on Main, 2 blocks from the community center. Familiar. A little too familiar. After our project review, I stood in line for a refill. The barista, someone who had known me since high school, tilted her head when she saw me. "Didn't know you were back in town," she chirped, pushing the lid onto my cup. "Visiting for the week?" I smiled. Polite. Warm enough not to start anything. But something sharp caught behind my ribs. "I never left," I said. She blinked. "Oh, huh. Thought you were out of state or something." I shook my head and walked out. They hadn't just erased me inside the house. They'd rewritten me outside it too. The next Sunday, I heard it from someone in the HOA. Apparently, Vera and Roland had attended one of the monthly brunches. the ones where everyone brought deviled eggs and swapped gossip under the guise of civic pride. The Simmons family still played their part. "She's thriving," Vera had said proudly. "Callista's deep into her pre-law program. She's got real direction." Someone at the table, Mrs. Hensley, I think, had asked, "And Miley's?" Vera's tone had shifted, a beat too soft, a touch too rehearsed. "She's exploring. You know how it is with creatives." Roland didn't speak, just poked at his plate, quiet as ever. The person telling me this had looked a little embarrassed just repeating it. I think everyone could feel it, that pause. I nodded. I already knew that silence. I'd lived in it. That pause? It said everything. Later that week, I was out front trimming dead leaves from the lavender when Mr. and Mrs. Ellis walked by. They were older, had been neighbors since we were kids. We'd borrowed sugar from them more times than I could count. They stopped at the edge of the path, looking over the hedges. "Well now," Mrs. Ellis said, "we heard you moved in here. It's really beautiful what you've done." I glanced up, unsure how to take it. "Thank you." "It's quiet," she added after a moment. "But powerful." She didn't mean the decor. She meant me, the house, the statement. They waved and kept walking. I watched them go, then turned back to the plants. That evening, after I showered and folded laundry, I found a small envelope slid under my door. The handwriting on the front was simple, familiar. Inside was a torn sheet of lined paper, the kind Roland always kept in a kitchen drawer for to-do lists and grocery reminders. The note had only one sentence. "Your mother doesn't know I wrote this, but I saw what they did. I'm sorry." No name, no signature, just the weight of something that had taken years to come loose. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the paper still open in my hand, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. Not entirely. The next day, I pulled out my old laptop to prep for a client consult. The villa was quiet, the morning light slanting through the blinds, dust catching in the air like it had nowhere better to be. I clicked the power button and waited. The familiar startup tone buzzed, and for a moment, everything felt normal. But when the screen loaded, it wasn't my desktop. No folders, no documents. Just a bland, factory reset home screen like the machine had never belonged to anyone. I opened the file browser, checked every drive. Nothing. My portfolio. My client templates. Gone. At first, I thought it was a glitch, a system failure. Then I remembered something. Months ago, Callista had borrowed my laptop, said her own was running updates, and she had a last-minute submission for a legal fellowship application. She was frantic, loud, pacing, so I handed it over without a second thought. Now, everything I had ever built inside that drive was erased, not wiped by accident, deleted with intention. I sat back in the chair and let that sit in my chest for a full minute. It wasn't the files. It was the fact that someone looked at my work and decided it was expendable. That afternoon, I went to the grocery store to restock on the essentials. Almond milk, oats, spinach, candles. I'd learned how to shop for solitude. While loading a small bag into the back seat, I heard my name. "Malis!" I turned. Vera stood by the trunk of her car, chatting with a woman I vaguely recognized from church years ago. A social smiler, the kind who always found a way to ask about your life in front of others. Vera waved me over. "Look who's here!" I nodded, polite. The woman smiled and asked what I was up to these days. Before I could answer, Vera jumped in. "Oh, she's doing some fun artsy stuff. Designing social media logos and such. Creative outlet, you know?" It was the way she said fun, like I was coloring at a diner table with crayons and a placemat. I let the pause stretch. Then I met the woman's eyes and said, "Actually, I just wrapped a full brand campaign for a regional wellness chain. You'll see my work on the billboards down by Main Street next month." The woman blinked. Vera blinked harder. I didn't stay for the awkward follow-up. That evening, I sat out on my patio with my laptop, logged into my site, and hit update. I uploaded the latest campaign, rewrote the About section to reflect what I had actually done, not what they thought I did. I didn't need applause. I needed presence. They had written me out of their story. So I started writing my own. That night, I checked Instagram one more time. I know, I shouldn't have, but I did. Callista had posted another selfie, hair curled, blazer sharp. The caption read, "When you're the one the family believes in, some people were born to inspire, others to follow." There was no mistaking who that was for. I didn't react. I didn't scroll. I took a screenshot, saved it to a folder titled Fuel. Then, I opened a client presentation I'd been prepping and added a new title slide, How to Own the Story Without Saying a Word. The sunrise filtered in slow, golden, and quiet through the back window of the villa. My villa. I poured hot coffee into the chipped ceramic mug Nerida had sent me years ago, back when I still thought birthday cards from her were the only proof I mattered. I didn't dress up, didn't need to. I was home. The curtain over the sink window stayed open that morning, and I didn't close it. Let it face Vera's kitchen. Let it frame her view the way she'd spent so long trying to edit mine. At some point, I felt the familiar weight of her gaze through the blinds. I didn't shift, didn't wave. She blinked and turned away, like she'd seen something she wasn't ready to name. The pool out back was still unfinished. The tiling had just been sealed, but the water hadn't been filled yet. And still, it reflected the sun with a kind of discipline I envied. This piece wasn't gifted. I fought for every inch of it. That afternoon, I was pulling weeds near the lavender bed when I heard the creak of the side fence. Roland stood there, one hand gripping the wood, the other shoved into his pocket. He looked like someone who'd wandered into the wrong memory. "You really did it," he said, barely above the wind. "I did," I replied, not looking up from the soil. He paused, watching me gather dead leaves into a small pile. "Your mom. She doesn't know what to do with it." "She doesn't have to," I said, standing up straight. "I didn't build it for her." He nodded. That kind of nod you give when there's more to say, but not enough courage to say it. We both knew that was his way of admitting he saw it all, that he'd always seen it. But silence was easier than truth in our house. I didn't resent him for it anymore. I just stopped needing anything from it. Back inside, I turned on my laptop in the office, my office, and opened an email draft. A clean line across the top read, Client, Serenity Wellness. I attached the final brand package, color palette, logos, social templates, mission statement copy, all designed from a place that was entirely mine. I added a quick note. "Dear Nina, please find the final assets attached. Thank you for trusting me with your vision. It was an honor to build it from this new space. Warmly, Milas." Before I hit send, I looked at the wall across from me. On it were pinned prints of my last 3 projects. A photo of me and Nerida from a beach trip 3 summers ago, and her handwritten card, framed in matte black. Proud doesn't begin to cover it. The patio called to me in that soft evening kind of way. I carried my mug out, barefoot, letting the warm wood settle beneath me. The sky was that quiet pink gray just before dusk. My favorite. I sat by the pool, feet just skimming the smooth concrete edge. Then, the sound of a door sliding open. Vera stepped out slowly, a trash bag in one hand. Her shoulders were tense. She moved like someone unsure of her welcome. Her eyes landed on me. We didn't speak. She paused. Then she turned back inside, and I stayed exactly where I was. I didn't move. I didn't shrink. I didn't smirk. I just breathed. The next evening, I was wiping down the kitchen counter when my phone buzzed. I expected a delivery update or a client invoice. Instead, it was a message from Kimberly Saunders, someone I hadn't spoken to since sophomore year. We were never close, mostly just shared study guides and traded glances when teachers asked for volunteers. Her message was short. "Hey, did your mom really post this? It's kind of wild." A YouTube link followed. Curiosity got the better of me. I clicked. The video was titled, "Raising Women of Value, My Journey as a Mother." There she was. Vera, hairpinned, blazer pressed, eyes locked on the camera like it owed her something. She spoke about values, discipline, how motherhood is a series of strategic investments. She talked about raising daughters who lead. Callista's name came up 6 times. Her LSAT scores, her volunteer work, her potential. I watched the full 22 minutes. My name was never mentioned, not once. Not even a footnote. When the video ended, YouTube queued up a makeup tutorial. I clicked X and shut the laptop without flinching. I didn't rage. I didn't shake. I just stood up, walked to the back door, and opened it. Outside, the pool caught the last traces of twilight. That light blue that almost looks silver if you squint hard enough. I stepped out, barefoot, the concrete still warm from the day. That weekend, I hosted dinner. Nothing fancy, just grilled vegetables, a bowl of herbed couscous, and wine in mismatched glasses. Narita came, wearing her usual linen shirt and bringing a pie I suspected she'd bought instead of baked. 2 of my clients came by too, Lauren from the wellness chain and Derek from the florist project. They'd never met each other, but talked like old friends under the string lights I'd stapled across the fence. We didn't toast. We didn't make speeches. But then, as we leaned back in our chairs and the night settled soft around us, Narita raised her glass and said, "To the kind of strength that doesn't need a witness, but earns one anyway." I didn't cry. I didn't say thank you. I just lifted my glass back, nodded once, and felt full in a way no holiday dinner at Vera's ever managed. Later, when everyone had gone and the candles burned low, I opened my laptop again. This time, I navigated to my site. Clicked About the Founder, typed slowly. When they gave my room away, they gave me something else, a reason to build what they couldn't take from me. I hit Publish. That morning, I woke before the alarm. The house was still, birds just beginning to speak. I pulled on a robe, opened the sliding door, and stepped into the crisp morning. Across the fence, Vera's curtain was open. She was there, her silhouette stiff, eyes locked across the yard. She didn't move. Neither did I. I picked up my towel, walked calmly to the pool, and slid into the water. Not to swim, not to escape. Just to float, steady, still, certain. Some things are built in silence. Some views are only visible when you stop looking back.